Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Rev Left Radio. On today's episode, I have my longtime friend, David Icenogle, on the show to discuss his struggles with, trials and tribulations regarding his own struggle with alcoholism and addiction more broadly. We cover so much, ground with regards to addiction in this episode. We really try to cover as many aspects of addiction and alcoholism as possible, as well as learn David's personal story, which is daunting, to say the least. But, even though this is a very serious topic and a very difficult, challenging topic, and it hits so close to many of us and our lives, Dave is also a hilarious dude, and he always has been. And so throughout this very serious conversation, he infuses it with his uniquely dark humor. So although this episode is very serious and even heartbreaking at certain points, there's also this comedic relief that he weaves into this episode that just makes it really fucking good, really engaging, and makes him incredibly endearing. And he also has a YouTube channel called No Chaser, in which he explores these different elements of addiction and alcoholism even more closely and even in more depth, and I'll link to that in the show notes as well. So this is my conversation with a longtime friend. We met when we were freshmen. The beginning of this episode is just sort of us reflecting on some of the crazy times that we had together as teenagers, and then it moves into this broader discussion of alcoholism and addiction and everything that goes with it. So this is a timely and important episode with a very good friend and somebody who's been through the shit in every imaginable way. So without further ado, here is my conversation with my longtime friend David Icenogle on alcoholism and addiction.
I'm David Icenogle. I'm a recovering alcoholic, and I do some freelance writing. I've written for Passenger's Journal, Asylum Magazine, as I'm being ungainfully employed in that respect. I'm painfully employed at a boring office job that's soul-crushing, but I just want to talk about what the experience is and what goes on in the mind of an alcoholic and addict.
Absolutely. Well, welcome to the show. And you and I go way the fuck back. I think we go back further than me and any other guest that I've ever had on the show. Do you remember when or how we met?
Yeah, so I don't remember the exact moment. I hope that doesn't offend you.
It does.
That lifelong. Okay. No, I remember it was just through a couple of friends, and we would just play like basketball. It started out on, and then we were like
pantsing each other a lot.
Yeah. I could totally see how your intellectual political discourse started with us making fun of each other for not being able to grow beards and having important conversations of which Super Smash Brother character we were. I really see how it informed what you became today.
I'm a Luigi.
Yeah, you tag a lot of your podcasts with that line. Right?
Every time.
Oh, yeah. Excellent, cool. That's super professional. Yeah, you know what? One thing, real quick. I don't know if you remember this. It's actually related to this. One of the, and we'll probably get into discussing it, but like one of my first like big moments where I'd say like the point where I got addicted, like a lot of alcoholics and addicts would describe a sort of aha moment. Mm-hmm. Now you would probably think the aha moment is realizing, oh, my life is terrible, I'm addicted. It's actually the aha moment is kind of the psychological shift from that first real high or drunk, like in the sense of, you hear people talking about chasing the dragon, like that first high. I really had that experience. I don't know if you remember it at your house. I had, because I had drank and like smoked weed and stuff, from like 13, but they were, that's the thing too about that aha moment. It's not necessarily the first time you get drunk or get high. There's just a certain point where something goes off in your head. And so I had done that before, but I had really started out with, alcohol was the main thing I did, but I had really started out with, pain pills. Mm-hmm. And I mean, you could say that when it comes to chemical dependency, I have dual citizenship, but, I remember it started as like the classic American love story. Boy meets doctor, doctor overprescribes opiates, boy falls in love with them and lives unhappily ever after. I had just picked up a bottle of Vicodin from this like the mouth surgery. I mean, it was really, I thought it was my wisdom teeth, but actually my teeth were so young, it was just other teeth. It was
I do remember that when you came over and your face was all swollen.
Exactly. Here's what I don't know if you remember. It was so stupid. I don't know if I thought it was being funny. I had the notepad because I couldn't talk. And I was almost like maybe I should still play basketball, but I knew like one of her friends would like elbow me in the face, and my teeth would fall out. But I remember that moment. I had just popped some, and I driving on the way there, because it doesn't say don't operate heavy machinery, but they're talking about like forklifts and stuff, right? Not like your car. But I got over there, and I was just like, I was in a time in my life too where things were externally great, but I had, I'd suffered from depression since I was in 6th grade, and I just got into one of those big funks, and some of that depression was, of course, being friends with you, but I popped some on the way there, and I got there, and I was just sitting. I remember it so clearly. I was sitting and just watching you guys play basketball, and I had my little notepad, and I remember almost wanting to write, I feel happy. It was this huge, and if I had the capability for self-awareness that no 15-year-old would have, or a lot of people don't, I should have seen this as a problem. That aha moment was, I want to feel like this for the rest of my life. I want to do this every day. And that should be scary. The fact that, like, a lot of people can have that naturally, where they start doing something, they find their passion, or they find a community that they feel like accepted in finally, and it's a huge change in their life. It should be scary for the fact that I just ingested a chemical, and this is how I feel about my life now. Right. And I remember I felt that there. It was the first time I really got high, and I was just totally enjoying myself. And that's where, like, it was a real, this is not normal or good. You shouldn't ingest a chemical and be like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Right. Like, it was this tectonic shift in my priorities, and everything I had and what I wanted to do just completely took a backseat to this new thing. I mean, they were still kind of important, but at the end of the day, it's like, man, if I could feel like it's very depressing to think that I thought this is the first time I've been happy in a long time. Yeah. And it's not based on meeting someone that I fell in love with, having a child, getting this job, finally getting, connected with people that, know who I am and accept me. No, it was just ingesting a chemical. And I was like, this is a game changer. Yeah.
Wow. I do remember that day. And we're all joking about it and stuff. And you were in a good mood, even though your face was all swollen.
Exactly. It was like at a moment where you think I'd be extra, like, crabby or not feeling well, I felt happy. So basically what I'm really trying to say is the destruction of the last 15 years of my life is your fault. I don't know if you were getting that yet.
I had no clue. I'm so fucking sorry.
It is funny in a sense. That's really
that's where so interesting.
I had that quote unquote aha moment.
So me and you, I do remember specifically, I think we met in Miss Stein's Spanish class freshman year of high school. I think that's when I met you and Jones.
I'm laughing.
And then the next several years of our life was us doing drugs.
Yep.
Doing other crazy shit, playing a lot of basketball, de-pantsing each other a lot.
Yes.
And what else did we do? Oh, we made music.
Yeah. I didn't know you were going to bring that up.
We used to rap when we were teenagers.
Really well. Like,
I think we had one fan on MySpace, which we still remember and love.
Yeah. Shouts out to Russian Bot 442. Yeah, no. See, the good thing is that I became a drug and an alcoholic, so I had reasons to do those things. You did those mainly soberly, which is very...
Which is somehow worse.
Yeah, very upsetting that you accepted those things with a natural mind.
There is one thing that the audience on Rev Left, most of them, especially longtime listeners, are aware of, which is this mushroom experience I had, my first one ever at 16. Remember Joe and me got a quarter of mushrooms, and he kind of wussied out at the last moment, so I took a full quarter. Yeah. Remember when I fell in the grass in the parking lot of that movie theater?
Yes, yeah. Well, and remember, what's funny is that if you remember, we did it before because me and you did it together. But that one was, I probably wouldn't think it would be the most enlightening experience, being that we got into a car accident during it. And the funny thing is,
totaled both cars.
Which is
you were driving one, I was driving the other.
I was not driving one.
Jones was driving your car.
I had a designated driver. I did the smart thing to do, and he was just like crashed into you. And I'm just like, dude. And
terrible.
What was so funny though, again, was I think you really took at it as like, let's, expand my mind, a new experience. At that point, it was hard to get pills, and I was just like, I feel depressed. Hopefully, I thought it was like, mushrooms just is like more weed, right? I had no idea it had like
it's weed plus
psychedelic effects or anything like that. Like I don't want to get too much of the story, but I remember that night just for the fact of like everything was, and you know what's funny? I can use a sort of comparison to that moment of what I felt like on mushrooms in terms of craving. Like when you feel like craving to drink or use, like in new sobriety or something. I'm sorry if this is going all over the place, but it's kind of apropos. I remember, when I was high on mushrooms, one of the big things that was like made it into a bad trip, besides the car accident.
The totaling of both our vehicles.
That's
the cops coming and our parents having to
a lot of hippies don't recommend totaling your cars in public with police coming. But no, I remember this feeling of, oh no, I think I broke my brain. Like I was getting, an altered state and not even hallucinating, but just having that difference of reality. And it was interesting, but then my stupid mind chimed in and said, oh no, what if it's going to be like this forever? What if you broke your brain? And basically it was this feeling of, based on nothing, but that I'm just going to feel like this forever. And it was just like, this won't go away. And I use that as an example to liken to craving sometimes, where it's just this very intense moment of obsession and compulsion. And in that time frame, in your mind, you're like, this is what I want to do. And you have such a strong urge, and this is not going to go away. It's going to be like this. I'm not going to get out of this craving until I do something. And it's so funny. Sometimes when you surpass it, when you get past that, you look back maybe 3 hours later, and you're like, oh my God, I would have just totally fucked everything up if I did that. Like how crazy it is that I thought I need to do that. And the even crazier thing is that, maybe a day later, you're like, no, it was right. I do need to drink again. Like your mind just, it is an unreliable narrator to the things you want to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I don't want to linger on this too much. We should have you back and just do like a Patreon episode where we just talk about all the shit we did.
I think so.
Because it is so fun to talk about. But I just have to mention that. Well, in the movie theater mystical experience where I had the subject-object collapse, which I didn't even have the language at the time to talk about, but I've told the story many times, and I always say, after a few moments of like ecstasy laying in the grass, feeling the stars rain into me, my friends ripped me up out of the grass because I was making a scene, took me back to the van, and you were one of the friends that ripped my ass up out of the grass and said, hey, like, we got to get in here or the cops are going to come because you're like having an orgasm in the grass. Families are walking by you to their movie theater.
Yeah, you literally look like... Well, what's funny too? Not to get like too in deep about this, but it's funny if you compare and contrast that experience that you have, with the one I was having. So where my mindset changed when I got like that opiate high that first time and felt like everything was like with true happiness, and you guys were just around me. I was like, oh, that's cool. David's in a better mood, which would eventually be just a shift in the mind that would plague me for years and years and basically the rest of my life. And you were having a positive one, and we were like, no, you got to stop that shit.
Cut that shit out, whatever's going on.
I think we're both of it. You are at my fault for my chemical dependency issues, and I'm at your fault for not transcending into self-actualization. So,
and I just have to say
we're even.
Front,
Basically, I'm saying we're even.
I just have to say up front, Dave is joking about me being the cause of his addiction. I cannot bear that burden, okay?
Okay, good.
I refuse to carry that particular cross.
It's seriously his fault.
Okay. Last thing I want to say about these goddamn drugs we used to do together.
Yep.
The car crash situation, we're high on mushrooms, both our cars are utterly totaled, two of our friends take off, quickly apprehended by the police, but we also had... we had the ingredients to make napalm in the car because a dude was beefing with me.
I didn't know we were going to get into this.
About a girl. And so part of this trip was we do mushrooms. We're 16. Do mushrooms, get in the car, drive to this guy's house, set his car on fire with napalm, and then come back and have the rest of the night, I guess, just having fun. But we got in the car accident before we got to napalm this kid's car. So.
In a way, it might have saved us from God knows what.
We'd probably be in jail right now for arson. The napalm would have caught the nearest house on fire.
It was truly a choose-your-own-adventure of utter craziness.
It really was. Wild shit. But, okay, that's for a Patreon episode for those interested in our reminiscences.
I'm almost more excited about that.
Suffice it to say, you and I go way back. We've had crucial, fundamental life experiences together, good, bad, and ugly. fights together, like on the same side always, meeting dudes up in parking lots with ripping our shirts off. Donnie and you.
Get the napalm.
We would vandalize houses and shit. Really bad, unfortunately, but we apologize for all that.
Allegedly.
But just crazy teen shit. But anyway, we've been very good friends for a very long time. There were periods in our 20s where I think we drifted apart, and I was actually not, fully aware of how deep, your struggles with alcohol were, because I think during a lot of that depth, we were kind of doing our own things in our own lives. You know how it is with friends. As you sort of grow older, you ebb and flow with your relationship. But recently, we've gotten sort of more and more back into contact. We went fishing together. We've talked together, and you went through a brutal process with your alcoholism, and I just lost my dad a few months ago to alcoholism. I have multiple alcoholics in my family to this day, and I know a lot of people out there listening either themselves struggle with alcohol or some other substance abuse disorder, or certainly have somebody in their family or friend circles who do as well. So I really want to talk about your experiences, gain some insight from what you went through, and hopefully some of this can resonate with and perhaps even help somebody listening. So I guess let's just go ahead and get into it with the first question, which is, how and why did you get into drinking originally? We talked a little bit about that first opiate high, and you're like, oh, wow, chemicals are my thing.
Yeah.
But how did the drinking in particular start, and when did you start to realize it was a problem?
Right. So it's interesting that it started with pain pills, and then just as it always happens, it'd move up to like morphine, Oxycontin, Dilaudid, stuff like that. They honestly, not anything on me, but I just glad I wasn't really in the fentanyl era that we are now. Right. Truly, I had multiple friends that, or at least acquaintances, people in my circle that had died from that, and it's just crazy to think about. But
we had a mutual friend that died from opiate overdose.
Oh yeah. And that's just us. Like there was the other, the little cast of ne'er-do-wells that I was a part of too. That it's crazy. But I started with that, and I was just really. So what happened was that I was with other friends that had the same pursuit I had, to get pills. But the thing was that they were very expensive, and it was hard to get somebody reliable to get them from on a regular basis without being crazily overpriced. Every once in a while we'd find a connect like that. So what was kind of happening was we had like our little drug side of things, but we'd also drink, but that was like kind of considered normal. And a lot of times drinking was like plan B. And so it was just seen as kind of like more partying stuff. And I did really like drinking. I just kind of like preferred the high of opiates at the time. And the way things kind of, went about was that with drinking in there as well, it was so funny that just the societal perspective on drugs compared to alcohol, like drugs, that was a real problem. Like that was, what was I doing with my life? Again, what's hilarious is that really when I was doing pills, I would basically just like smoke cigarettes and watch reruns of The Office. But when I was drinking, like I was, starting stuff or getting into fights or just driving, or like trying to, meet with girls and like all this actual dangerous behavior. But that was actually the better one in my mind. It was truly the opiates I had to worry about. And the first time I went to treatment, it was for opiates. Like I didn't even talk about alcohol, even though literally every time I drank, I got drunk and I did something. A lot of times it was opiates, but I was always, again, the importance was the altered state. Like
were you mixing alcohol and opiates?
Yes, I was doing that too, because again, like it's just this process of just getting what you need purely. So I like with money and what I was able to afford or what we were able to get, like it wouldn't be enough of a high. So I would drink with that too. And then where it was really crazy is that I started going to a methadone clinic, and I was like, I'm going to get off opiates. And then
what age were you, just to be clear, at this time roughly? When you
at this time I was like 18.
Going to the methadone clinic? Yeah,
I was just able to, and I also knew that I had problems with drinking just from the way I drank. And I really didn't, something that was seen as a blessing, but actually a curse, is that I got along with people well when I was drinking. I was never like an angry drunk. It was like fun to be around. So like I didn't really cause any problems really, and so it wasn't seen as bad. But it was really I had to stop the drugs. But I knew I drank a lot, but again, when compared to the drugs, it didn't seem as bad as a problem. So I was going to a methadone clinic, and I was doing that to get off, to be honest, though, I really didn't have a plan. Like, I was just like, this is cheap, and it will just kind of sustain me, and just the whole drug world and everything. I need to get away from that. And I need to do something just to appease the people around me and have some sort of, like, semblance of, like, normalcy in my life. Yeah. And then I just kind of, you're on, with your tolerance and everything, just on methadone, it was just truly normal, like, feeling. So I just was drinking. And I almost forgot that it's like, dude, you're taking, like, 80 milligrams of methadone a day, and you're starting to drink more and more. And I would just totally forget that methadone is in my system constantly. Yeah. It was like taking a multivitamin. Yeah. And I started, like, it was a wild time, because I started having like this almost sort of like chemical narcolepsy, where I would just be drinking and, it would just be like lights out sometimes.
Like you would black out or you'd pass out?
I would straight up pass out. Like it wasn't, every tolerance was going up, with the alcohol as well. So I was just drinking a little bit more and more. And, at some point the body's like, dude, we got too much in our system. It's time to, and it wasn't like daily or anything, but it would just happen. There was one time I remember I got off work from my sad little job, and I went to my sad little apartment, and I just had a sad little meal, the saddest of all meals, the Stouffer's for one lasagna.
Oh, Jesus.
And I just was eating it. This was at like 8 o'clock at night. I wasn't tired at all. And a moment later, I just woke up like choking on lasagna, because I just almost comically face planted into it. And I got up, and it was... I had been there so long in the lasagna, to just, again, the lasagna, that it actually, like, the tomato sauce crusted onto my face and eyebrows. I looked in the mirror, and I was just like, this is your life, Dave.
Oh, my God.
Picking these pieces out. And it was just kind of like
you just passed out, you fell face first into the lasagna.
Mid-bite. And, which I don't know if that's a promotion for Stouffer's or not, but
almost certainly
get at me if you want.
They're not going to do that.
Like, literally, if I could have, like, died from it. It's seen as, like, super silly, which it is, but it was that level of passing out. And, like, if the coroner came by, he could have ruled it, like, death by lasagna. Like, that's where my life was at. But, so, in this sense, what happened is that I had a suicide attempt. And this is something I want to touch on, to be candid about. I would call it a coin flip suicide attempt. I was still a little bit scared of death, but I just, my life was just in ruins. I was more so about the damage it would do to other people, but I just didn't know what to do. So I had saved up a bunch of the methadone over a couple of days. And I got really drunk, and I took it all at once. And I was actually in my car outside my apartment, because I was sharing it with my girlfriend at the time, and I didn't want her to find my body. But I still knew that there was a chance that I'd survive. It was this weird, I call it a coin flip, because I knew for sure what could kill me for sure. Right. And I just still wasn't. And the reason I bring that up is because I think a lot of, not even alcoholics and addicts, a lot of people do that. And there's this phrase, a cry for help. And it's very interesting that it's the sense of when people call it that, it's a kind of a demeaning thing at times. It's like, oh, it sounds like it was a cry for help. You tried to kill yourself like 7 times. It's a cry for help. And, I take that on as, why isn't that seen as serious as it is? Like, some people almost kind of roll their eyes at it, but it's like this idea that if you're willing to put yourself in bodily harm because you're in so much turmoil inside, and you don't know how to express it, and you don't know what to do, that should be taken just as seriously. It should. And the reason I bring that up is because a lot of times it's like, yeah, I tried to kill myself, but I was just like if I'm being totally honest, I was like, I don't know if I would kill myself. But in my mind, I was just like, maybe that doesn't have the gravitas of seriousness. And I'm just, in my mind, I'm like, fuck that. It should be taken seriously. I used to, I used to think those things too. I was just like, what, you tried to overdose 8 times? Like, you didn't take the whole bottle. Where were you saving them for someone else? Why not just take the whole bottle? And I almost had this very mean, callous idea of it, where all of a sudden I didn't take it as seriously because it wasn't to the fullest extent, because it wasn't a gun to their head and the gun jammed. It was like, but
I see what you're saying.
so that was like a side point I wanted to make. But at that point, I had, when the cops found me and resuscitated when I woke up,
Jesus.
they weren't too bad. They did end up giving me a DUI. Very nice of them.
Fuck.
It was because this is before I had. Now,
you were in the car though in the parking lot.
Yeah. And here's what's funny: I didn't have a smartphone. And believe me, smartphones were around at the time. I think I was like, I was 22 at the time. This was back in like 2013. And so I just had like the radio. It was just like, just like Art Bell or something.
Yeah, coast to coast.
Yeah, something like that, or maybe ESPN, whatever. But it was just to listen to something. So my keys were just clicked in just to the level to listen to something. And so yeah, that was a DUI. But anyways, when I was in the hospital, they were like, "We're gonna get you off. You're not gonna take methadone." So I had to go through alcohol and opiate withdrawals at the same time, which not recommended. But from that point, though, it was seen as like a total clean slate, like purge myself of all this stuff.
Because you've detoxed, you've withdrawn, you're beyond that.
And it was my family became more aware of where I was at for how dire the situation was. And I had a jump start with the court system because now I was going to be on probation and everything like that. And the opiates were basically done from that point. But, it's funny, if I'd go back to myself and be like, all right, the drugs are done, and that was a bad part of my life. In future, Dave would be like, no, we're just getting started, man.
This is the prelude.
Dude, because this is 2022, right? I've been sober for just over a year.
Yeah, so. We should say that. We should say you've been sober now for over a year.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it was only just buckle up. And so from that point on, I was in this sense of like, yeah, I need to quit and stay off this, but eventually I just started back up drinking. And the way, like, in terms of like when I knew it was a problem, it was infused with drugs, so it was kind of like those are the real problem. But it was like I'm taking methadone. I'm an alcoholic too. Like, this is no longer hiding the ball. Like, it doesn't matter. You have to quit any sort of substance or anything. And the thing is that with like progression of your drinking habits and how things happen, it's not, it's funny. There's not like these conscious decisions that you make where you just go, oh man, okay, I'm doing this now. I'm crossing this line. I'm going to start drinking in the morning, or I'm going to day drink or drink alone, or I'm going to drink, at break at work or at work. Like, it's not like I'm doing this now. It's kind of this way you get like inoculated into these sort of habits just from these like spur of the moment things you do, to where, like, I remember the first time I was like, I drank alone. I drank alone, and I didn't think anything of it, was because I was actually going to go out with my friends later, but I was like, the bar is too expensive, and I don't know, like I saved some money and whatever, and so I just started pre-gaming, as one would call it. Yeah. And they were like, oh, we're not going, or it's too late, or I'm just I can't drive now and no one's picking me up, but I'll just keep drinking. And I was just like, oh, this is kind of a relaxing night. That's totally fine. And so no reason to not do that again. And then, as far as like drinking in the morning, I, woke up one day and I was just super hungover, and I was just like, well, last night was crazy, and Advil, I don't think it's going to take care of this, but I have a few nips in the bottle left over here. I'll take a couple of those. It wasn't like, no, what am I doing? It was just like, kind of do that. And then same thing, like drinking, like at break at work, I was just like, dude, the day is just, let me grab a couple of shooters. I've seen other people do it before. Like, this is, where it like really like started to come upon me of like things are going bad was actually some of the more moral failings I was doing in terms of what you'd say outside interference. So like when I had to like start lying or hiding stuff. I mean, this might just be my experience, but at the time I didn't think it was that bad that I was doing some of these alcoholic habits, like drinking alone or, drinking on break from work or just the amount. Like, I knew it wasn't great, but I didn't think of it as that bad if it was no consequence to others. It was when I had to start like lying, and you have these quiet moments to yourself when you're doing something sneaky, or like for me, like taking what's left in the vodka bottle and putting it into a water bottle, and then like hiding it before your girlfriend comes home, and you put it all the way at the bottom of the trash because God forbid she digs through like the soppy cans of soup and the salad you threw in there and the pizza box. God forbid. So you got to put it all the way at the bottom, only to lift it up. You could see the bottle hanging from the bottom and clanking against the counter. But those quiet moments to yourself when you're like sneaking and doing stuff. That's when you become. At least that's when I became a little bit more self-reflective of like, oh, this isn't great. Like, and just the having to start doing these lies or having to lie about like when I'm going to be able to come over or hang out because I just got off work, but I need to get my drinks in and stuff. It was a lot of those things. I think maybe it was like less of self-interest in my own health and well-being. I was just fine. I didn't think it was too bad of a problem, even though they were like clearly alcoholic behaviors. It was more so I was like, man, I was an honest person. I'm like lying literally all the time now. And it was funny too, because in my mind at some point too, I had like two sets of categories of lies. I had like bad lies, like I'm being a dishonest person. Then I had like to keep things up lies, like the lie, like
maintenance lies.
Right. It's not bad to lie that I was, I had to do this because I have to drink, and I don't. It's not nothing against them. I just got to do what I got to do. It's bad if I like lie about what I feel about a person or what I did or what I was doing last night or something like that. But like these are just to keep up the alcoholism thing. I mean, it's your fault that you'd be mad at me for this. So now you've created this burden upon me to start lying and stuff.
Right.
But there was a little bit of that, but also again like the hiding in it, and it all escalates to where, again, it's not these like very pinpoint choices you make to escalate your life. You make them in accordance to where, it's taking you, and it doesn't, it's kind of in a way, it's like when people get like radicalized on like YouTube or something, where maybe someone doesn't like go forth and seek out, maybe white nationalism good, or maybe the government is turning the frogs gay, or they don't search that video, but like the algorithm gets it to it. In a way, it's kind of like that, where you start out with one thing and then just the momentum kind of carries it to you. And the thing I think I could say pretty confidently with like addiction and alcoholism is that once you fly first class, you don't go back to coach. In a sense, reverse that though, because by going to first class, I mean doing shittier and shittier things.
Once you get in the garbage can, you don't get back up.
Right, exactly. Like once you start drinking like in the morning, you don't do it like immediately after that, but it set a new paradigm in your mind of like, this is maybe not acceptable to do, but I got to start doing this now. Like there is these moments of escalation and they don't come back. Like the addiction toothpaste is out of the tube, you don't put it back in at a certain point.
Right.
Like you can in times of even if you've had a good amount of like sobriety, you can pick back up with maybe I'll just have a couple of beers or something like that. And pretty quickly you just go back to what you're doing, and then the progression continues.
Like you're swept up in a river that has a momentum of its own.
Right. Or you're just drinking a river of vodka and your life sucks.
We've done too many metaphors and analogies.
I know, this is crazy. Like, just speak normally. But, so, yeah.
All right, well, now that we have an idea... Well, I guess before I move into this question, just to be very clear, I think people can use the context clues to get this, but they're different types of drunk. Some people will drink wine. My dad would drink, high-powered beers all day and all night. Mm-hmm. So what exactly were you drinking?
Oh, man, it was straight, like, vodka, cheap vodka. Like, there was no pretense to me. I can't remember the last time I drank vodka that came in a glass bottle.
Oh, shit.
To put it in perspective.
So you're talking McCormick's.
Oh, yeah. The classics, man. Yeah. The stuff where, it's funny. It'll say shatterproof on it. It should say shatterproof, but not your life. This shit.
Specifically just this bottle.
It's so
which
fun.
you will inevitably drop multiple times.
It's hilarious that they'll have like a thing like drink responsibly. It's like, dude, it's a $9 like handle of vodka. Like the only thing you should have is like the suicide hotline number on it. Like drink responsibly. Like,
nothing is responsible about any of this.
Like, look at this thing. It's in like Russian, but it's made in China and it's sold in like a Hispanic gas station. Like this is, yeah. And So it was really like, in a sense, there was no, like, I had my college days of partying, but some people, the way they drink is really from maybe a culture it's infected by, or the people. Mine was, it was really, I drank like a crack addict, in the sense that it had no real connection to things around me. Like, if I could drink with like other people, there was some sort of event for that, that'd be fine. But like, it was all about just doing that. And eventually it became isolating enough where that's all it was. It was so many times it was, on my way to work, just have the bottle, pour something into the water bottle, and get a Diet Mountain Dew, something as a chaser, and be upon your day. It wasn't even, it was just this clear liquid that was just infused in my life. And, in terms of talking like types of drinkers, I would almost say like there is the types of drinkers, I think, can be more predicated on the habits of drinking. So like, I know that there is a lot of alcoholics to where they would never drink in the day and never drink at work. But they come home after work and they get blasted. My experience, it wasn't like that. It was more of like a morphine drip, where I would just take nips of the Dasani water bottle, like every day, or not every, sorry, at moments throughout the whole entire day. Like I said, at work, just chock full of, breath mints and spray and stuff, like just this crazy system to keep it going. But it wasn't about like getting, wasted, which for a lot of alcoholics, that is the thing. It's the fun of like going from 0 to 100. Right. Mine was more about just keeping that buzzed feeling throughout the day.
All day long.
And yeah, it's funny. Alcoholics can their trajectory of their drinking can vary a lot too. There's a lot of these wine drunks, like you mentioned wine, like a lot of women that just later in life, they really start their alcoholic career, if you want to call it that. There's people that, that they never drank in high school or anything like that. They, for some crazy reason, waited for the legal age of drinking. And then they start in college and it goes out from there. Or some people, drinking's always been a big part of their life. And then when they get a little bit more isolated in what they're doing, even if they have like their own family or something, but they're not so much surrounded by people like maybe they were when they were younger, the drinking will start to kick off more than that. But there's different habits of people. Some people, it blurs the line between the idea of like a problem drinker or an alcoholic, where they don't really, they don't have a lot of that same sort of the habits or behaviors of some alcoholics, or what you consider alcoholism. Like maybe they drink 3 times a week, which is, above normal, but they always get very, very drunk.
I see.
And the thing is too, they will continue drinking even in the face of like consequences. So they may not be doing it every day, a lot of people, there's like the idea of like Skid Row drunks. That's what a drunk looks like. And there's a crazy amount of, what do you want to call functional alcoholics or things like that. It's really dark, but there's times, I've been to treatment with a lot of people. And for some ungodly reason, there's always friend requests. They're like, hey, we met when our lives sucked. Let's be friends on Facebook. And it's sad. Again, this is kind of dark, but I've been to treatment 5 times, and I've acquired a lot of friends from that. And I know, unfortunately, a lot of them are back in active addiction or drinking, just like I was. And it's so funny. I can know that because I still correspond with some of them. And you see their lives, because Facebook, is kind of bullshit anyway. Like, it's the highlight reel of your life. No one's just like, hey, I'm going through a really tough divorce. Also, here's pasta I made. Like,
exactly.
But it's even crazier to see the life of someone who is like actively, not maybe an alcoholic, like actively struggling or actively a meth addict, and they're just going about their life, posting about taking their kids to soccer games, meeting the people for Thanksgiving. Like, what do you think about, what our team's doing this week? Or, hey, should I what would you recommend for like this dog groomer place, or just this normal life? But you see past like the pictures and the profile pictures, and from, talking with them or knowing about their lives, kind of through others, people that are worried that they're like dying straight up. There was one person I knew that it was just almost eerie, where he was posting this stuff with his 3 kids, and it just life looked like it was going great and everything like that. And he was dying of liver failure at like 32, and he could not stop drinking. And so like the types of alcoholics, the idea of like what an alcoholic look like, you know, it is something that is not easily seen unless you are like at least have some sort of like deeper connection in their life, unless you can see truly the day-to-day things. Like you can't look at like resumes and be like, well, that person was clearly an alcoholic or an addict.
Right.
Like a lot of times it's totally, you can be like, you can see like the lapses in work or something, but you could see a bunch of sterling resumes or like they're doing all this stuff in their life, and it's like, yeah, but their life is a miserable slog in between all of it.
Right.
And so,
Absolutely.
you know, it's really just about what it does to your life than about the modes of how you partake in it.
I see. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and resonates with my experience with alcoholics and my family as well. They all are very different in what they drink, in their patterns of drinking, in their levels of functionality with regards to their drinking. But yeah, all of them are more or less equally fully immersed in a hardcore alcohol addiction. Well, I know you've talked about some of this stuff, but maybe you can just talk kind of about the summary of your experiences over the next several years. Like we're in our early 30s right now. You're talking about some of this stuff happening in your early 20s and then intensifying through your mid 20s. So kind of talk about how long this whole thing happened, and mention some of your lowest points or even your relapses. You've mentioned that you went to rehab 5 times, and I assume 4 of those times were failures. So
all 5 were failures.
Oh fuck!
But I can
Go
ahead.
You
know, it's like they have the little punch cards though. Like, you know, the 5th one's free if you fucking destroy your life again. But so the thing was that again, it was the perspective of it was just weird because it was first started out with like drugs and then there is like these crazier moments or these real lows or, you know, something like that, like times where I got like DUIs. And, you know, I have this idea about the, you know, hitting like rock bottom. And there's this sense that rock bottom is when your life has come crashing down. Like it's all falling apart now. It's all like it came to this. And to me, at least in my perspective, is that rock bottom isn't about this event that happens. It's really just something that reveals what your life is. Like I didn't need to get a DUI and go to jail to know that my life sucked ass.
Right.
Like my life was already terrible. I just happened to have a headlight out. Like, you know what I mean? It wasn't like when someone left me because they just couldn't put up with it anymore. It wasn't because that day I got drunk and erased the DVR of the shows they wanted to watch or something. It was just the grind of it over time. Like these things, these kind of consequences that occur, they can be jumping off points, and they can be like they're more of like the big milestones of bad things that have happened, and it's like now this is a push to really do something about it. But whenever I talk about like rock bottoms or these low points, or I would say that there's a lot of reasons. People say, think about like not getting DUIs or in legal trouble for possession, and think about not going to jail or losing your kids, or think about, not getting divorced, and think about all these horrible things. You don't want those to happen anymore. But sometimes what's forgotten about it is the just misery of your life as it is just in the day to day. Like to really describe what the years were like was just every day my life was just a Jenga tower with a bunch of pieces out of it. And I was just kind of going through it, and there was always that sense. I mean, of course there was hangovers and some health problems and stuff, but like there was just this very thin veneer of keeping things up and things are all right, but just this anxiety inducing reality that at any moment it could come crashing down. Like I talked about like the headlight thing. Yeah. Like because of where my life's at, because I drink like, all day, all the time. There was legitimately, honestly, I think there was about a 2-year period. Probably at least a 2-year period where honestly, I don't think I've ever would have blown double zeros on a breathalyzer. Wow. Like I just always had it in my system. Like even if to me I didn't feel drunk, I was probably driving over the legal limit on my way to work. And it was always that sense where I'm just I'm just living my life. I feel really crummy on the inside and things are not going well and whatever. I'm just kind of carrying along and I go to this job I hate and I'm having relationship problems and all this stuff. But maybe I don't know. It's just, oh, wait, there's a cop behind me. And they can just totally because of that. I get pulled over. I get another DUI. I go to jail. Work is going to let me go now. Maybe this is a good time for her to leave. I could be homeless now. Literally just because happened to be a cop behind me. Right. Or just, like, for instance, every time...
Somebody bumped the table of the Jenga tower.
Right, exactly. And then every time, that anxiety just follows you. It's really funny because you have also, like, a lot of irrational fears that are based on rational things to be afraid about. So, like, for instance, at work, I remember I wouldn't have screwed anything up. Things were going totally great. And the manager would be like, hey, Dave, let me talk to you real quick. And I'd just be like, I'm getting fired. Because in your mind, you're not living well and
right.
Things are a disaster. And so anytime there's like any hint that the curtains are going to open and they're going to show your life is going to be revealed, it's all going to come crumbling out. Again, it's just horrible to live with the lying or the hiding and then the physical, waking up. Literally just every day hangover is how you wake up. There's no more hangovers anymore. This is waking up. Like there's all these things that come with it, and for some people, the waking up with a bunch of text messages and you're like, oh my God, what'd I do last night? I remember, thank God for the thing that they did with phones where you can like scroll a little bit and you can see at least the preview of the text messages.
How bad is this fucker going to be?
Because if I had a bunch of them and I scrolled it down and I saw my name in all caps, I'd be like, you know what? I'm going to turn my phone off. If it just said OMG as one of the many texts that it's starting out with, I'd be like,
David, please call me.
And especially if one has a picture attachment, you're like, oh God. But again, I could have
17 attachments on this text message.
Yeah.
Fuck.
That looks like a police office number. No, but like again, you could just get a bunch of texts from like a text chain or someone, for any other reason. But if you wake up in the morning and you see that, you're like, I did something horrible. Or it's all coming crashing down. It would always be like that. And there would always be this anxiety that came with it. And everything progresses too. So you talk about like what my life was like over the years, where it was kind of funny. I could see this like graduation program of my life, like literally in a physical embodiment. So I went to like the same gas station because, maybe some alcoholics, there are people, they try to like, they do like routes where they go, I don't want this person to see me buying booze at the same place at the same time. I need to uphold my character to this gas station who doesn't give a fuck about my life. So I'm going to now drive to this one and this one on Monday and this one on Tuesday. And for a while I was like that, but I was just like, fuck it. I'm going to put all my shame upon this one attendant. They will know.
One 19-year-old lady at the fucking gas
station. They will know my life's a disaster and that will be it. Like almost like in a Christ-like fashion, we will put upon all our sins onto this person, so that way I don't have to drive all over the place.
Right.
There was like no joke. I would. I remember. I wanted to talk to her after like this year and be like, "Hey, did you ever care or anything?" And she felt like, "You're an idiot. You know how many alcoholics come in? This is a mega saver, sir. Like, we sell cell phones here too."
Well, I worked at a gas station, and I did have not a lot, but 2 or 3 people who would come in to get their shooters at 9 in the morning. And you're like, what in the fuck is going on,
Oh, yeah.
But you're never going to say, hey, do you want to talk? Like, you just cash them out and send them on their way. Yeah.
Of course. Like, there was one person I saw that was at this, like, liquor shop near me, and we would have good conversations, and he was, like, fun guy. But it was so weird because it was just, like, he's selling me this poison that's destroying my life, but it's just like, I like this guy. And it's not on him or anything.
Of course.
But, no, I was going to say that attendant came to the point. So I talked about this graduation program where it started with, I don't need to get a handle, dude. Like, a handle, if you don't know, is like almost what it's like. It's the big bottle, like the gallon or whatever it may be.
Literally has a handle on it because it's so big.
Yes, exactly. That's how you know it's drinking in moderation. Right? You cannot hold it in a way without help. But, I was like, I'm not getting a handle, dude. I'll grab a pint, on my way home, and then it's just like, you know what? I just need to, like, it's cheaper to just get the 5th. It's like, am I really? This is like Tuesday in the morning. I'm like, am I really gonna get a 5th? And it's just like, yeah, dude, who cares? And then it's just like, literally the levels went up to where on the top there was the handle. And it's just like, am I gonna start really getting handles now? Like, I'm just gonna buy like 4 of them to start my week, and this is what I'm going to do. And eventually, it's like, yeah, I just graduated. So the gas attendant, when she'd see me come in, she was smaller. So when she saw me come in, she would already grab the stool to get ready to get on it, to reach for the handle.
Oh my God.
And it was funny.
Brutal.
There was one time where I was in a small term of sobriety. She did it, and I was just like, nope, not for me. I've turned my life around, and how dare you assume I was going to buy that thing I've bought 94 times in a row.
Everybody in the gas station applauds.
No. They're just like, he'll be back. And I was. But
One thing really quick before you move on that I kind of want to linger on just a tad.
Yeah.
Because you've alluded to it, and I definitely, now, I have nowhere near that level of experience. I've done lots of drugs in my life. Thankfully, actually, my one vice or the one addictive pattern that I got into was with marijuana, the least harmful of all the substances. But the mind games of any level of addiction, where literally you'll tell yourself, convince yourself, put the fucking hammer down, I'm not going to do this, or only after this time, or only this amount, and then literally seconds later, you completely construct a justification for throwing what you just committed to out of the window. And then you feel shame about that, but it's always this push and pull, and there's always this little or multiple voices in your head shifting from moment to moment. There's no way to have a long-term game plan.
No.
Because when you're lost in addiction, it is a moment-by-moment fight for, getting the willpower to say no. And then the next moment is just as hard. And eventually 4 moments later, you're like, fuck it. Actually, I do need it this time. This has been a particularly rough day. I'll start next week, right?
Oh, right. Yeah, you always are making amendments to your Constitution that you swear you never read.
That's how you put it. That's a great...
Yeah, and it's a good... So this is a funny story. Yes, because totally, it was what I was saying before about you don't go back to coach. When you do these things, especially in terms of moral failings too. I was stealing change from people. There was these crazy times where I actually, whether it was my mom or my girlfriend, they, just to see I was on the right path, they would want, I had a shared account, and they'd want receipts.
Like a bank account?
Yes. Okay. So if I went to a gas station, or if I went to any place that sells alcohol, they would want me to text them a receipt of it. And in my mind, I was like, all right, I'll keep to this. But eventually I was like, you know what, let me look into Adobe Photoshop. And I started...
Oh my God.
I got really good at that. And I started adjusting the receipts to make it look like, and I would do these things where I'd buy a certain amount of gas that matched the price, and just, it's crazy.
Holy shit.
But you start kind of doing these things, and these moral failings you're talking about where you make these snap decisions, they actually start building a sort of proof that it's like, well, I've already done this. Does it matter if I push this level? Again, it's that incremental nature where you swear you would never do this thing, and then you do because you've done all these things before. And it's just so going back to that moment to moment, or that one moment you're like, no, and then you go and do it. That craziness, there is, I'll give one example that's so stupid, but I think it highlights it perfectly of what your mind can do to convince you, because it is not, there's delusions that you can create, but your desire makes you buy into them. You're not stupid. You're not you all of a sudden this became convincing to do this. It's just your want to do it overrides any sort of rationale or logic.
Sure.
And so, at that point, there was one time where I was on an alcohol monitoring bracelet, and so there was times intermittently when I did drugs, and it could have been anything. It could have been pills or Adderall or even weed a couple of times, but weed never did it for me. I'm the biggest pro weed advocate who absolutely hates weed. But there was the time, but I had to drink. I was like, I have to drink. But I have this alcohol.
So you're trying to use other substances, but
right.
You're just going to mix them. You end up just mixing them.
Right, yeah, well, I just use other substances because I just had this bracelet on, so I just couldn't drink alcohol. Right. But there was just dude, I want to drink, dude. And I can't, literally, it came to that. So there was this time where I looked at, and just good old Google, and you just Google ways around an alcohol monitoring bracelet. And one of the ways that came up was, they talked about, they even give you when they attach it, and they go, you can't pull your sock over where it's, in case you don't know, just a little in depth, the alcohol monitoring bracelet is something that's attached to you that every 30 minutes will go, and it'll vibrate, and it just reads your skin for the level of alcohol. So if there's any amount, like, people are worried about putting on like cologne or something because it's so sensitive to it.
But it's on your ankle.
Yeah, it's on your ankle. So it looks like an ankle monitoring bracelet. Like, there's people before that say, like, why does someone have 2 ankle monitoring bracelets? It's like, no, they're not in like double jeopardy or something. They have the house arrest one and the alcohol one. Just for those people out there being too judgmental about us, ne'er-do-wells. But no, so I looked this up and I saw this. This is so stupid. I saw this thing where it just said, like, lunch meat that you would put in between the bracelet, because there was a little bit of room, and you could put the lunch meat in between the bracelet monitor. You're already laughing. Oh, the bracelet monitor.
What do those socks smell like?
And your skin, right? Because in a way, in this weird way, the supposedly the according to the trusted people of the internet,
yes,
it kind of simulates the skin reading, so it could pass it. And I was just like, I remember when I looked that up, I was like, oh my God, that's so stupid. Like, lunch meat? Like, what are you going to do? Like, if I drink once, I'm going to want to keep drinking. I have this thing on for like three more once. What am I just going to keep packing in the lunch meat literally to like get away with this? And oh God, what if I like get drunk and forget to like replace my lunch meat? And I don't even know if this works. And what if I get like wasted and I'm super hungry? I'm like, hey, I can't get up. Maybe I'll just scrape a piece of this lunch meat off.
Now the poor lady at the gas station has to ring in your handle as well as a package of bologna.
Well, no. So here's the thing. Yeah. So I'm like, that's so stupid. Almost laughing to myself. Right. So you talk about what your mind can do in a short amount of time. Like, laughing at that, literally 20 minutes later, I'm in, like, a grocery store in the lunch meat aisle. I'm just like, I wonder if the consistency of ham is better than turkey. Bologna, because that's another phrase for bullshit. That seems a little too on the nose. What about roast beef? I don't know. It's weird. It doesn't match my skin color. Should it match my skin color? Like, literally, from a moment of seeing how ridiculous and laughing at it is to that urge driving, I'm just like, you know what? Let me look more into this.
There it is. Or literally, if you were on your way to do the thing, but still, as you're on the way to do the thing, you're rationalizing to yourself, well, I might go there, but I'm not actually going to buy this.
Yes, yeah. You do this. There's a lot of times where you do kind of a psychological Trojan horse, where you create this thing where, like, I'm doing this because of this. But inside there's the real thing where it's just like, this will get me somehow to drink or use. Right. And you just pack that in. And so you digest it and be like, okay, I'm doing this. But secretly on the inside, the Trojans come out and like, no, we're drinking tonight. And there's this, it's so funny because there's so many, it happens in so many different ways to where it goes back to the thing I said about like the mushrooms and that feeling that it won't go away. There's like this sense of like permanence it has because it's so intense. The obsession and the want to do it is so intense that it's weird. Like, time can like slow down, or you have this mindset that can't be interrupted by anything else. So it literally just kind of like bludgeons you to doing it. Like it's just the erosion of it, like,
because you can fight it off for a time, but it's just so relentless.
Right. And like a big thing about recovery is like finding, people say you try to find your ways to get out of that set, but the real thing is to try to stop them in the beginning, or to try to nip it at the bud. Because at a certain point, when you're in it that deep and you have no defenses for it, you're gonna, like, there's times where I had been like, maybe a few months sober, and I was just like, dude, this you can't drink. And it was almost like an out of body experience, me walking to the gas station, like almost as if I couldn't stop myself, like literally from almost a third person perspective. I'm just like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And I'm just like, I'm going to do this. I literally like almost could feel myself put up walls for any sort of like thought of why I can't do this. I was like, I just almost seriously, like, mentally and emotionally plugging my ears and going, la 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 la. We're gonna just drink. I don't think it's gonna be different this time around. I don't think I'm gonna drink normally. I don't think it's gonna end well. I don't want to hear it right now. One funny thing is that a big idea in recovery is like, live for the day. Like, live, carpe diem for a lot of self-help stuff. Like, live for the day, live each day just for today. And in a very weird way, alcoholism and drug addiction is in a way, it is truly living for the day.
It's the dark version of that.
The dark version of that, because you are not thinking about the future a lot. I mean, you are truly living for that moment, for that buzz. And there is, like, truly, in a way, sometimes I think about it now, there is something very comfortable about that. There's something nice about having just the top tier thing that it's like everything's okay if I just get that one thing. My pursuit is that one thing, then I'll deal with the rest of the crap.
Right.
Like it's like when you're living just a normal life, you're just like, I have to figure out like the finances and how is this relationship going and what am I doing with my hobbies?
And where's this career going?
Yeah, it's so comfortable to be like, dude, my only game plan is just to get this thing. It's a very like in a sense like comforting way to kind of like go about your life, because it makes it like it's not only a familiar misery that a lot of people experience when it comes to like going back to drinking or using that familiar misery of how your system in your life is, but it's also it complicates your life immensely, but it's a very uncomplicated system of living. And it's very attractive, I think, to people, at least like me, that can overthink things and just go drive themselves crazy with worries and stuff. And you'll have plenty of other worries and stuff because of what you're doing. But the main goal of just doing that is it's very tempting. You know, I just as a quick like segue, I would say that when we're talking about progression of drinking and like how you go, how things get worse, how things, escalate, when it comes to drugs and alcohol, like you can think of like the Maslow's
hierarchy of needs.
Yeah. So you think about that, and at the bottom, like, it goes down from like self-actualization and, self-esteem and like a cheap cell phone plan, and then like I don't remember the rest of them. But at the bottom,
very great summary of a class.
I have a degree in sociology. Thank you very much. But at the bottom, you have that like the base thing, right?
Yeah.
Now with an alcoholic and addict, imagine you add another thicker, heavier base, and it's alcohol and drugs, right? So when you're in active addiction, it's almost like you flip the pyramid upside down. So now that big base is top heavy, and it's alcohol and drugs, and it starts, as you go on, it starts to crush these things underneath it. So like the self-actualization, gives a shit about that.
Off the board.
Yeah. Self-esteem, I've already bought, vodka at 6 a.m. with nickels enough. I don't need that. That is only holding me back. So that gets crushed. And then the other things like, love, self-love, or love from others, it just over time, just imagine that base is just crushing all the things under the pyramid to the point where if it goes on long enough, security, I think, was one of them, that your biological needs like sleep and eating, even that begins crushing until the goal is at the end, it's just that base thing that's left alone. And that is how kind of the progression goes in terms of what you're willing to do, what your mind wants to do. And it's learned that like soul focused behavior, which again, you wish you could just have for anything else, like a passion that you have in your life. Like,
that single-minded dedication to something. People,
a lot of times people are like, you need to be as dedicated to recovery as you were to getting drugs and alcohol. And I'm like, okay, that's not happening. As long as
you understand.
Dude, if I have like 30% of that dedication, I think I'm good. Because, dude, I was willing to like walk through the snow and wait in freezing cold temperatures outside at 6 a.m, do things that morally disgusted me. Just crawl through with like withdrawals to the nearest gas station, stay up late at night, do these schemes. Like I was willing to, I don't think I've been more willing to do anything in my life beyond that. So let's just, maybe not all of it, maybe 30% of that determination, I think will help me a lot.
That's sufficient. Yeah.
Really
quick before we move on, I wanted to touch on something you said when you were talking about carpe diem and seizing the day, and this is like a dark version of that.
Yeah.
You're very much living in the moment, and there's something almost comforting about knowing that there's a single-mindedness to what you got to accomplish today, even if that is about drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
But there's something with all addictions that I find, even with some of my struggles around like my uses of marijuana, which is the grounding effect of certain rituals that surround the substance. So with marijuana, it's obvious. You're grinding up the weed, you're knocking it out, you're smelling it, it's very aromatic, you're loading the pipe or the bong or whatever it may be, the joint. And I think with every addiction, even with gambling, with sex addiction, these rituals surround the object of desire, and rituals, just broadly speaking, are a sort of grounding, deeply human thing that we do. And specifically in times of chaos or uncertainty or anxiety, we might turn to certain rituals that bring us comfort. Even just going into the room, opening up my weed box, smelling it, grinding it up. That is a grounding thing that brings me into the moment. Now, with marijuana, it's certainly not as bad as opiates or alcohol or anything like that, but it's just this ritual surrounding the object of one's addictive desire. Does that ring true to you with alcohol? And if so, what were the sort of rituals surrounding your alcohol use? Yeah,
so I would say a lot of my friends that I know that were still in opiates when I had moved on to alcohol or whatever you want to call it, unfortunately some of the ones that had died, they would talk about how the best moment of their drug going experience was, especially when they were shooting up, was the preparing of it. Like, I remember too when I'd get drugs, because they were harder to get than out, like finally buying it and having the pills in like whatever thing, like a film canister or just a cigarette cellophane or something, holding it and being like, yes, I have it. Like that was, I think that certainly comes with alcohol in a sense of you get to have this like carrot ahead of you where it's not just the ritual of it, but you get this relaxed sense of, especially if you get off work and you're going to the gas station, the familiarity, even if it's the person that's like, this person's like he's literally buying bologna and handles of vodka a day. What is happening, man? No, but the effect, because it's not just the rituals, because the rituals, you could say, at least in my case, were not particularly, like weed sounds way better, like the smell and like the ambiance or whatever, but it is doing these things knowing it's coming to the effect. So they become more likable, or they become enjoyable because it's building up to. It's almost like if you're listening to a song where you really love the chorus and you just have that verse and you're like kind of getting through, and even think the verse is kind of stupid, but you're like, here comes that banger chorus, and you're just like that building up to it. Like I remember I loved, one thing I loved about alcohol when I was working, I could be dealing with somebody like in person, like handling accounts, and the person would actually come in and it was like really confrontational.
At your job?
Yeah. Really confrontational, and I could seem like, dude, totally serene, like I could handle it totally fine, and people were like, wow, that doesn't bug you or anything. The whole time this person was like yelling at me, or it's this really intense conversation. Like above his head, I can see the water bottle I had in my car filled with vodka floating above his head. And the whole time I was thinking, this is okay because I know after this I'll get that next drink. So this is totally doable. And then literally just like for it to be done, and then to have the lunch break, like people like their lunch breaks is because the break from work. Mine had this extra thing of like, I get to go back, sit in my car, pop that glove compartment, and it has that familiar little. I should really change the Dasani bottle. I've been using it for a lot. Like water bottles aren't that expensive, but that familiar bottle just pops out, and I have my little chaser with it too, and the sense of not just the ritual of it. Like I think it goes, at least for me, it goes to something deeper that drugs and alcohol did for me. That I was so it was so deep in my core. Something I still feel is that I feel like a lot, and this could have been due to my experiences with, suffering from depression. I couldn't count on anything to give me contentment or enjoyment for sure. There was a lot of things that usually would, but I couldn't, there's a lot of things in life too, where even a great vacation you have planned, that's going to be awesome. Things come up and it becomes a nightmare sometimes, or especially on a broader level, like you thought that getting this career, or finally getting this job, or doing this thing is finally going to bring you the happiness that you want, or like working towards this goal, or just these little things in your life where you're looking for happiness or you're looking for fulfillment of something, and there's no guarantee of it. There's no guarantee you'll find it, even when you get the things that you want. And the biggest thing for me was that the drinking, putting this liquid in my body had a guaranteed feeling every time. So like it was so nice. It gave me this sense of control on what my happiness was. Whereas like before I was depressed and I didn't know why. I was just struggling. I was like, I have a pretty good life. Things are going pretty good. Like what is going on? Why isn't, this is kind of selfish. Like why isn't I'm enjoying these things? I should. And then with alcohol, like it gives me, even if it decreases, the value of it depreciates. Is that a word?
Yeah.
Okay. Even if that happens over time because of your tolerance, and we talked about like chasing the dragon, chasing that first high, it still has this guarantee, like what to expect and how you're going to feel, and there's such comfort in that. To when then you put all your enjoyment in life on this thing, it can cause all this horrible crap, but at least that thing keeps giving you what you want, or at least a semblance, over time of what you want. At least it's giving you that. So even the rituals or things around it bring some sense of comfort because internally what the outcome is going to be. In fact, to that point, there's a lot of people, I think it's very true, and it kind of sounds selfish or awful, but there's a lot of people, despite all the consequences that happen in their life or all the hurt they've done to others, they said one of the main reasons that they were able to really quit and stay sober was they just didn't enjoy it anymore. Like, it was like, I'm doing all this stuff, and man, I'm not even getting that enjoyment. Like, this is bullshit. I mean, I should at least get something that I want on this return of this huge investment I'm blowing, so to speak.
Right.
And, like that, when that enjoyment's still in there, when it still brings you that relief, it's hard to pass up because it's like, it's going to produce what you want, like, every time. Like, nothing else in life does that for me.
Yeah, that's incredibly deep, and I think a lot of people out there, regardless of what they struggle with, share that. And I think one of the biggest things that I've learned in my life, specifically through my practices within Buddhism, which maybe we can talk about a little bit later, is that human beings in general feel as if there's something missing. We're not fully worthy. We're not fully fulfilled. We need to fill something within ourselves to get a sense of happiness or contentment or peace or whatever you think life has to offer on the positive side. So there's an externalization of our search for happiness, our search for ourselves, our search for that anchoring, that happiness, that contentment, etc. But when it's externalized, it always leads to suffering. So when you say, I will be happy when I get the partner that I've always wanted, when I get the job I've always wanted, or at lower levels, when I can have sex, or when I can get that drug or that alcohol or that substance, whatever it may be. It's always something outside of myself that I need to go out in the world and obtain, and then by going and getting that, maybe I'll be able to find that happiness or whatever it is. But then you find when you get the thing, that happiness is very elusive, and even if you have a few brief moments of happiness, you find that you're still stuck with the same old desiring and the same old sense of I'm not enough and I need something more, blah, blah, blah. And I think, with our society in particular, fame and wealth and status are the things that is the carrot dangling out in front of all of us in a general sense. You want to be happy, you want to feel like you're worthy. Get money and fame and status in this capitalist society, and you will be able to have that respect and that happiness that you so desperately want, right? And then a lot of people, the few people that actually can get those things, they get there and they realize, oh, wow, that feeling that I'm still not happy is still here. Mm. And then that can either lead to psychosis, or you can just sort of numb it out with drugs and alcohol, or you can distract yourself from it, or some people eventually start trying to look inward. And that is a whole journey in and of itself, but I am a firm believer that any sort of happiness or contentment must come by going inward, not by searching for things externally. But we have nothing in our culture that tells us that, or that implies that. Everything in our culture says everything is outward. Do, be productive, accomplish things, show your bank account, how rich you are, how good of clothes you can wear, how nice of a car you can drive. And that is how you get respect and happiness in this world. And I think that's a real problem. So does any of that resonate with you? Do you feel like that has some truth to it?
I would ask, have you ever heard about the sacred word of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ?
Jesus Christ.
No.
Actually, I have.
The reason I say that is because that is usually what's used a lot for that inward nature of stuff. Especially with people in recovery, when they need to fill that, that's kind of the thing they replace it with. Which, by the way, I'm not against any of that. But what you're talking about, that inward journey, a lot of it about addiction and alcoholism is a sense of you're replacing something that is missing. Yeah. And some people have I would say everyone at some point in their life, or for most of their life, struggles with that. And whatever remedy, that inward journey, people are so afraid of taking, or frankly, as you put, don't even know where to begin to take it, or don't know to take it.
Yes.
And that's why I brought up the joke about the Lord and Savior, because a lot of people think that's like the hack to doing that. It's
Right,
like, all right, this is the inward journey. And the thing is that like alcohol and drugs is such a no pun intended mainline way to dispel with that journey easily. And other people who, most people in the world, I guess, that don't have drug and alcohol addiction, they flail in other ways to find that thing.
Totally.
But they don't have the consequences that drug addicts and alcoholics have. And so if I'm trying to find, I'm normally a very cynical person. I thought alcohol and addiction made me that way. Turns out I just am. But if I'm to look at a silver lining in some respect, I wouldn't wish the affliction of drug addiction and alcoholism on anyone. But one silver lining of it is that when you get sober and you don't like have that thing and you realize you're replacing that with someone, it helps you actually push you to that journey a lot quicker. Some people, believe me, they totally replace it with, all right, now I'm going to follow what the normal people are chasing.
I'm doing CrossFit every day.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to work, putting in works. I'm a workaholic now and, all that stuff. But I think for some people, it makes that, like what you just described, it makes that realization quicker because they know that a lot of those things are just as hollow as drugs and alcoholism that they chase. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the people that have all the things you were talking about usually go right to drugs and alcohol. Yeah, the rich and famous people, that's like...
And sex.
You know what? Yeah. That crack addict on the street, he had it right. I'm now a man of the people.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, well, that actually leads really well into this next question. And this is one that we've talked about offline, and you have a really, I think, interesting perspective on this. So many times people drink to cover up unpleasant feelings or, any sort of addictive behavior. Often it's the alcoholics in my life all share a low sense of self-worth, low self-esteem that they try to hide and cover. But if you know somebody at their deepest levels, a very close family member, that's what's going on. Other people use it to deal with trauma, with shame, depression, grief, etc. And certainly the people in my life, or even my forays into various forms of possible addictions, were kind of centered around internal suffering and trying to get rid of it. Is that true for you? Is that true broadly? You can take this in any direction you want. But what do you think about that idea that with alcoholism, let's just say specifically, more times than not, it is using that substance to escape unpleasant feelings that you don't have the tools to face sober?
Mm-hmm. I think it brings up a very, an endless but interesting discussion that usually happens with a lot of these things of the idea of nature versus nurture. There are some people that, unfortunately, what you've known in your life, that alcoholism passes down like the family name. And there's an idea, like people have argued, like there's things genetic, and people even, some people, and I totally understand the sentiment, like when it's called the disease of alcoholism, some people are kind of off put by that, just because cancer's a disease, and there's stuff like that. So it goes into this idea though that I think about a lot, where it's like, okay, there are things that can certainly push you toward addiction and alcoholism. And there's things that can exacerbate it, and there's things that are like, especially those psychological problems or trauma or your environment, that can make it harder to do the things you need to do to recover. One could argue, well, look, it passes down like the family name, in people, so that's got to be a hint towards like genetics of alcoholism. And it's like, well, I don't know, have you ever grown up in an alcoholic home? Like, it's stressful, and unfortunately you have not great role models at times, or you learn a lot of bad ideas about the nature of life, or it's just fucking stressful. Yes. And like that can push you in that sense, and you kind of have these learned behaviors. Maybe it's not genetic at all. Maybe it's just being born into that, like and having that upbringing that pushes you towards it. There is there's certainly so many things that can be these sort of gateways to alcoholism and addiction. And the main point I think that I like to make about this, or I like to be considered, is that these things can do all these things to foster it, to push it, to make it harder to stop. But I think it's important to recognize that it is, once it is started or once you're initiated to it, it is it's its own thing. And by that I mean, like, so I try not to sound like an asshole at all for like saying something like this, but like there is a lot of people I hear before where they go, I drank because of this. And it could be incredibly like convincing stuff and totally justifiable stuff. Like, I drank because of the trauma I experienced, or I drank because I'm depressed and I couldn't like there's these things. I drank because this horrible event happened in my life. And I think that could start it, and that could again exacerbate it. But in terms of like trying to get sober, I don't think it's productive to think in that term, because like I said, when I say it's become its own thing, once it starts, like, you know, when you like day after day were like, you know, drinking before work, was that because of the trauma you had faced in your life? You know, like, was that, and again, that I should stop using trauma because I know it's like, but I'm like, let's say depression. So there's this, you know, I that was one thing I totally had as like a narrative in my mind where I was like, I drank because I couldn't find happiness because I was totally depressed. And that was certainly a huge part of it. But at a certain point, it wasn't about my depression, because I would get sober for a little bit and things would be going better, and I would just still be, dude, I have to drink. Like, it would still be there. And to place it on the idea of that was the reason, it could be a reason to start it, but at that certain point, you've created a new mechanism within you that's gonna, it doesn't hold bounds to like, if I cut this thing out of my life, therefore it will be gone. There are some outliers out there, and I hate to make so many caveats during this stuff, but I think they deserve.
It's a touchy subject, and people are. I mean, this is a very touchy subject for people, and they have radically different experiences, so you want to be careful.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's even, and you know, I won't say, but you know a person in my family who's a total outlier in the sense that they had this experience with meth, and then no recovery. They just dropped it, and they were
cold
just,
turkey. And
it was totally like a bad period of their life. And usually, it's like, no, man, it's not just a bad period of your life. It's now something that's inside of you. It's like, no, it wasn't. There's plenty of people like that.
I see. Yeah, exactly.
I'm just talking in generalities when it comes to this, and so the idea that this is what caused it. So once this is removed, this is what will stop it. Is not always the best way to go about it, because you might become very disappointed in the reality of it. Like, right. You know what caused it? Say it even is the reason why it started. Once it's begun, once you've carried on the life of an alcoholic and addict, and you've got dispersed the behaviors and rituals and all the things. Once you've trained your mind to do that, once you become addicted to the instant gratification, like that. Rarely will go away. And it doesn't matter if you've attended to these things and found great progress in the ails of your life. That is still there. Now it's like, okay, this was the reason it happened, but now it's a whole nother thing. Like, this is, and so I think also too, one other trap, I think I've talked to you about this before, is that there is something too when you consider what you've done as an alcoholic or an addict, you know, the shameful, embarrassing, or even just morally wrong things, where I got to a point where I came to the acceptance of, I drank because I liked the way it made me feel. Right. Like, that is why I did it. If there was a reason to put on it, that's why I did it. However, especially like in treatment centers, or, you know, there's always this drive, like the almost movie like drive to find, like in the movies with psychology and stuff, to find that one thing, the holy grail of what started all of this. Your mom never loved you. That's why your life is that way.
Right.
You know, the it's not your fault thing in Good Will Hunting, where you finally break down and you find the reason, and it's just almost religious experience of understanding this is the root of all my problems.
Revelation.
There's such a drive for that. And it can seem like, you know, a profound thing to do, to be like, if I excise this out of my life, this is where I'll be. And it's much, you know, again, you think about the things you did, and it looks like in a much more negative life and much more selfish. If I were to tell my family and the people I hurt, I did it because I like the way drinking makes me feel. Right. Because then I look like a fucking asshole.
So there's a natural inclination to look backwards and retroactively
put on a narrative. It was like, no. I drank because of the crushing depression and the unhappiness that was in my life. That's more palatable. But it doesn't matter. The same outcomes had happened. The same actions were partaken in. But to you, for your own esteem, like, it's easier to kind of swallow that. And if it's easier to swallow that, it's easier to kind of believe that. And it's harder, and it feels worse to say is like, I did those things because I liked the way it made me feel, and I needed to feel that way. I needed that. And if I were to, and believe me, I did try this for many years. I come at it where I was like, if I can take care of this depression problem, the low self-esteem and self-worth that I had in my life, which, by the way, a lot of it was just caused by what I did when I was drinking. So it's like a chicken or the egg thing.
Vicious circle.
But I did approach it that way, and that became fruitless because it's like, okay, you know, I'm attending to this depression. I'm in therapy. I'm focusing on that. But it's like, no, dude, it doesn't. You still want to do this. This is still inside of you as like something that you've trained your life to. Like all the things we've discussed about the simple and attractive nature of that one goal pursuit in your mind, or the idea you can have control on your contentment and happiness, or that all that stuff is involved in it now. Even if it wasn't there before, right. It just shifts your mind into this new brain you almost have of how things work. And
I would say that's probably literally true. And the way that I would frame what your point that you're making, which I agree with, is while there may be like mental or emotional variables that pushed you in the direction of this substance use disorder, at some point it literally neurochemically hijacks your brain. And so even if you were to deal with those prior emotional, mental, trauma-related issues, which is worth doing of its own accord, the momentum, the neurochemical hijacking has already so thoroughly taken place that now that is, as you said, its own thing. Now you need to deal with the actual chemistry, the neurochemistry of addiction to break that addiction, as well as perhaps addressing some of those other emotional problems. But overemphasizing, overstating the emotional and mental parts and saying, if I can just address that, then this whole thing will just sort of evaporate, right? Because the foundation for it is now gone, but then you try to address it and it's not evaporating. Then you can get it into an even more like sort of desperate, fearful situation of like, oh, I tried to do this thing and I thought I really did it, but yet the problem is still here. What is wrong? Yeah, I'm missing something. So if you go into it, or if you're in addiction, you realize there is that component, but you also have to take seriously the brutal hijacking of your neurochemistry. And at that point, it's a scientific issue.
Right. And it's absolutely right. And that's the thing. That's I go back to the idea of like the Trojan horse of where it, you know, a lot of people talk about those things like, you know, drinking made me feel the way I didn't feel before, where I felt accepted or powerful or confident or, you know, all those things, or, you know, drinking away emotions. It helped me cover up these feelings I had. It helped me cover up my past. It helped me. And it's like, yeah, that it totally works for that. Like if drugs and alcohol people are addicted to them because they are very effective in certain things. That's the problem, is they work. You don't see anybody, there's no commercials for let's do meth. Like, if anything, there's only anti-commercials, and yet that shit still sells gangbusters. And it's because, dude, they get the job done.
Right.
But, so it could very well do those things, but think of it as a scale of like this, where you have those negative feelings where you're trying to cover them. You're trying to cover up the fact that you just don't feel valuable in your own life. And then drugs and alcohol, they make you feel that way. And it's just like, that's when it starts. Well, the thing is now that hijacking, you've now learned that it does it for a lot of other things. It does it for stress. It does it for just how to have a good time, enjoyment. You've now applied that to everything. So now it's become more than just a multifaceted problem, to where the point I guess I'm trying to make with this sort of topic is that it is totally, especially when it comes to deeper issues like actual psychological issues or trauma or what your environment is, it is totally right and necessary to address those things when you're trying to get sober and to get better in your life. But you have to acknowledge that these are just fixing these things won't do it. Like this isn't the root cause and you cut it off at the head. You have to be able to address address how it's infected every part of your life. On every front.
It's infused into every social relation you have, every day-to-day habit you have, everything you do. So it's even if there was a single cause that was the impetus to all this, it's now taken on a life of its own, and it must be combated on every front. Yeah. And one of those fronts that I think gets overlooked, particularly in this society, is the social conditions. So we talked about genetics certainly plays a role, but it's not everything. Mental and emotional trauma and issues plays a role, but it can't be everything. The neurochemical aspect of it plays a role, but it can't be everything. And you'll actually often hear this line in broader society colloquially, oh, you're addiction aside, oh, you're oppressed, it's a neurochemical imbalance. Right? And people are like, oh yeah, if I just get the neurochemical balance right, then I'll be happy again. Well, that obliterates all the other variables. One of the variables specifically with me that I can relate to, and part of my struggles, not only just with addictive issues, but with like depression and anxiety and stuff, is like the meaninglessness of wage labor. Right? The day-to-day grind of going into a job you fucking hate that offers you nothing like fulfillment, that is just a grinding away of your alive and awake time in the cosmos. That to me was always something that really brought me fucking down. And then there's this dynamic that begins to arise when, specifically people that don't drink or use their substance during the workday, but there's that little carrot you dangle for the end of the day. I have to get through this shitty fucking job that I fucking hate, that I have to have or else I'll be homeless. But I know that the moment I get off, I can go to my car, I can light up that joint, I can take a swig of that bottle, I can, do that line or whatever it is. And for the few hours after work, I can escape, these brutal. And that's also proven true by the pandemic and quarantine. We've seen health issues and addictions skyrocket after 2 years of quarantine, the isolation, the uncertainty, the anxiety. That is a prime example of social conditions impacting people's mental health, and then that mental health can take the form of addiction, but it can also take a million other forms. So all those variables, including I think social conditions, which almost always gets left out of these discussions. Right,
because that seems, it's like, you know what, I can't worry about the world right now, I just need to not drink right now. So it's very easy to not discuss that stuff. And one thing I wanted to point out upon, which I thought I always think is hilarious, is you talk about that if we could get the neurochemistry right, or if we could do that thing, like, it's so funny to me because it's like, dude, you're falling back into the same problem. You're waiting for the chemicals to change how you feel. It's just like, like at least the meth addict is like supporting local business. Like what are we talking about? Are we gonna let Pfizer help us change our life now? Like, support your local business, man, at the very least. Like they're way better than those drugs. So yeah.
By the way, this episode is brought to you by Pfizer.
Yeah. Shouts out to Pfizer.
Ad break.
But yeah, like that idea too. Again, part of it is a paradigm thing where it's just. I totally, you hear, in recovery circles, you can hear about like cross addiction, or the things that you're still kind of doing the same things. You're just doing it in a more socially acceptable mode, or at least a less damaging mode of doing it. But it's still chasing that carrot, or it's still chasing that thing. You could do it at minuscule levels, and what happens is that eventually, and I've been through this, I just go, I just do the real thing. I'm still doing the same shit. Like, I'm still looking for the next time I can eat that thing, or I can jerk off, or I can fucking smoke like a cigarettes, or like hit the energy drink and get that nice little buzz at 6 in the morning when I'm waking. I'm still chasing the chemical things. Dude, just do the real thing now, David. You're still not even doing it the right way.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really macabre. It's tough for sure. All right. Well, let's actually move to the next question about getting sober, but perhaps before we talk about how you actually got sober, maybe we talked a little bit about like your summary, and I know you have some experiences, Golden Gate Bridge, South Dakota. If you just want to say like, one of those particular low points that people out there that are struggling with, people out there that have struggled with it or are struggling or have somebody that's struggling, these low points are important. Taking everything you said about rock bottom into account, which I think you're 100% correct on. Maybe you can touch on some of the more particular lowest points that you personally reached, and then we can get into how you got sober.
Yeah. So the way that my trajectory of my life is in terms of alcohol was kind of interesting. So like for the last 3 years before I had this run of sobriety, I would say most of the time I was sober. It was just, I'd have a month here, 2 months there, 3 months, usually that game. Never really went over 3 months sobriety. And I wasn't drinking that often. If I did relapse, it would be for like a couple of days. Before, it was maybe I would try to get sober, and it would just be like, nope, 2 years of straight drinking, or just the only interruptions. Like, I mean, you know how much I love, like, I continue to drink when I had the flu. Like, usually I don't do anything.
Right.
Like, even if I had the flu, I'm dragging my ass to that Mega Saver. Like, but you know, it was just the drinking just kind of persisted as that daily grind I was talking about, you know, before. And that was probably about, I would say about like a 7-year period of my life. And then maybe 8, whatever. But then there was like this 3-year period where I was really earnestly like trying to stay sober. And I'd say I did before, but I just wasn't even capable. But I was earnestly trying to stay sober and found some success. But what happened was that the relapses that I'd have were much like more acute. And I mean, like normally before, after just a long stretch of just drinking, I would like physically break down, and I'd start to psychologically break down, and just like, you know, you don't get any real sleep. I got no sleep when I was drinking. The sleep I got was dog shit anyways. Right. Like I wasn't going to bed. I was passing out. Like, so I would just like psychologically become, you know, unhinged at times.
You're not getting that deep restorative sleep.
Right. And I was just having like these mental breakdowns. I mean, there was many times I went to the psych ward because I'm just like, I'm going to kill myself. I'm not even like, I can't do this. My mind was just like broken by the erosion. And then I'd have a little bit of sober time and I'd go back to it, and it would kind of persist on as the daily drinking thing. Like in the last 3 years, it was very, very strange. But when I drink, it would be back to full bore. Again, I didn't have any delusions that I'm going to drink like a normal person. It was like literally my relapses were just an exercise of my apathy. Like I don't care. I don't think I'm getting, it's hopeless.
For you, it's a light switch. It's either on or it's off. There's no dimmer.
Oh yeah. But I would immediately go into this like fatalistic I'm like, I would call it like an angry apathy. Like I would just be like, just fucking kill yourself, man. Like it would just go off the rails quickly. And I like when you reference like the South Dakota, the Golden Gate Bridge, I remember I'd relapse, and I would be drinking, just going about my life, the life I recreated and rebuilt, like back at this new job and things were going well. I would go about that for 2 days and then realize it was unstable. Like people would already start to notice, okay, he's drinking again. And I don't know why. I didn't know where I was going. I just drove, and I had no reason to be in South Dakota. I just drove, and it was literally like I thought in my mind, if I keep driving, I won't. If I stop somewhere, I'm probably just gonna like stop and find a way to drink more or kill myself or use.
Are you drinking as you're leaving?
Yes, I'm drinking the whole time too.
So you relapse. You say fuck it. The people around you starting to notice. Yep. Out of pure desperation, and just the fact that you're fully now indulging again, you just take the fuck off.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that with these relapses I had, the more success I had, the harder the relapse was, because the more hopeless I became. Because after I saw I had success, and then it failed, I'm like, oh, I'm never getting out of this shit. Like things were getting better. Like I actually, I talked with my girlfriend, and she actually talked about the most disheartening moments, the hardest moments to stay there, or to not just like mentally or emotionally like walk away, or physically, walk away, was after things were going good, and then I just went back to drinking. Because it was like before you were just straight drinking, but I mean you weren't trying, or you were just incapable of getting sober. But once you got on track, then things at least had a chance to turn around. You've turned around and you've gone back. Things were going so good at a point, now I can't even trust it. Anytime there's even good or success in the future, there's always doubt, because you've done this before. There were so many times it was torturous. People would ask, like, you've been sober, like, what's different this time around? And I would just be like, I don't want to tell them the truth, but I want to go, I don't know. Yeah. I've been here before. That's like this horrible sense of deja vu. Like, I would be enjoying some success in sobriety, and it would just be like, I've been here before, though, man. Like, every time when I'd go back, when I'd have, 3 months of sobriety, where I want to tell people out there, you can make huge changes in your life after 3 months. After a month, I would have that, and I'd go back to drinking, and my mind would almost taunt me. It'd be like, You thought that sober life was you? No. That was just a dream, man. This is this life. This is who you were meant to be. There's no escaping that. Like, that little sober break you had in that was just an interruption of what your life actually is. You're going to die an alcoholic. That's the way. Some people get better, not you, though. It's okay. Like, I would literally think those thoughts, and I'd just be like, I was going to drive to the Golden Gate Bridge, which, by the way, I had to be drunk because it's just like, David, this is so cliche. Like, come up with a better way to,
Also, we live in Nebraska. That's a goddamn 2-day drive, dude.
It is. There was a time where I was drinking, I Googled, and I was like, that's Google Maps says it's like 23 hours. Like,
South Dakota is more reasonable.
Yeah. Instead of leaving Las Vegas, it's like leaving like Council Bluffs. Instead of like at Caesars, it's like maybe I'll just go to like the satellite motel. But it was.
Those are some local ass references. The satellite and CV.
Yeah. If you want to imagine what it is, just imagine a genital ward is a hotel. And
yeah, Google the satellite motel Omaha, Nebraska.
It'd be like you'd ask, is there bed bugs? Like, you're asking that now? Like, you come here to die, man. But like, in all honesty, those relapses, those low points, like there was times where I had to get like, going through both those withdrawals or going through withdrawals in jail. I mean, it's weird to conceptualize these low points. I would say the last final relapses were, I guess, the biggest low points is because, like I mentioned, the coin flip suicide before, and while I was just unsure, I was like totally convinced. I was like, I'm going to do this. And there was a part of me that was, when I was in this hotel in South Dakota, I was like, I'm just going to keep drinking because I won't do it if I'm just keep drinking. I don't even know what my plan is for the next 3 hours. I don't know what I'm going to do, but maybe I'll drink enough so my mind can be oblivious to where I found this grain silo that was like close to the hotel, and I was like, I'll jump off that. But I'll just keep drinking now, and I don't know where I'm going with it. Like, I remember I left my cell phone at home. I bought like a burner phone at some gas station just so I could, I don't know, Google things or just like try to distract myself. I just wanted to disappear. And it was kind of this thing where I was just like, I can't bring myself to do this, but everything wants me to do this. And we talked about a little bit off this, about the ideas of suicide. And my life is not, it was so hopeless. I'm like, it's not getting any better. And I thought things were hopeless before, where it's like, man, I'm not going to get any better. I'm just going to have to keep living like this. And then I got to another level of hopelessness. I was just like, killing yourself is the better option. And I really believe that. And that was those real low moments. But here's the crazy thing, honestly. That wasn't enough to get me to stop, in the sense where I drank after those moments, because those things, they don't hold you the way you wish they would. Like, there's certain things where people be like, this low point, I don't ever want to feel that anymore. And then time has this funny way of just like, you get past it a little bit and you're just like, that's not as crystalline in my mind anymore. Like, I don't want to feel that anymore. Well, I'm not. I'm in a different place, and I'm going to drink again. Like, it has to be, it can't be, in my mind, it can't be just because I don't want to go back to that place. Like, truly, one thing that is helping me, stay sober in this stretch is that I used to have my fantasies of my life were so pathetic, where I was like, I hope to just be a functional alcoholic. Like, I hope to just...
That was your highest aspiration.
That was at a certain point, I was like, all right, this is all that's on the table. So I hope that I live in some trailer with like 14 dogs, and I'm going to die alone because, no one wants to be around me, but I can attain to that. And it got to a certain point where once I every time I'd relapsed, it was like it's like you took my brain out and replaced it with a different brain. It was just like, all right, no, the real plan here, dude, is we're going to kill ourselves. And it literally became like, before I'd relapse out of that apathy, I was just like, I don't know where this is going to go, but it's going to go somewhere awful. It's like, now it's like, no, literally, next time you make the decision to relapse, you have to be ready to die. Like, really, truly. Like, some people say that, but it's hard to quantify, because like, I know if I drink, I'll die. It's like, well, if you drink, will you really die? I mean, you'll drink, and then you'll drink again, and I mean, you might get in a car accident or something, or your liver's really bad, and then you might have to go to the hospital. But you're not like going to die, right? It would be nice if it, in a weird way, if that was on the table, because then it could be a very binary decision of like, drink, die. And I can't. But there's usually leeway, so to speak, with that because you can relapse and then kind of it will go from there. At this point, I had gone so crazy right away that I just truly don't know if I were to drink again, what would happen. And I think if I were to drink again, it would be because I'm soberly suicidal. And maybe that would be enough to get me to do it. And that's at the point, and I'm very cognizant of that. And for the low points, that it would be a tool of, I usually don't like to anthropomorphize like addiction in some way. Like people like to put it as like, it wants me to do this.
It's a thing that has a will.
It wants me to do this. It's trying to, it's just like, no, it's just buzz chemical thing. Like it's not doing, or a psychological thing. It's not a thing. But if I were to do it a little bit, I'd be like, all the drinking is now about from this point on is to eventually be able to like kill myself, to die. It's to that level. And I know it isn't a lot for maybe most people. It's not at that level, but at least in my experience for this subject, that's where it was at.
Yeah, that's incredibly intense stuff. There is something that you said there that I think is interesting, and we don't want to spend too much time on this because it's not the focus of this episode. But you're talking about talking to yourself, like you even said the phrase like talking to yourself. We're going to kill ourselves, and I think that speaks to something that through Buddhism specifically that I've come to really understand is like how the psyche is split against itself, and how all day long we're talking to ourselves and listening to ourselves as if there are at least two people in there. There's the talker and there's the listener. There's the harsh critic, the superego, you fucking worthless piece of shit. And there's the you that cowers your head and like, yeah, I am a worthless piece of shit. And one thing that I think ultimately meditation and Buddhism can offer is the reunification of that sense of a split psyche that takes the form of incessant inner chattering to yourself all day long. Neither here nor there, but it just is true that anybody dealing with addiction, I think like there's already a split psyche in the healthiest average person, and then like these addictions and these mental and emotional struggles can even widen that gap, can make that split psyche into several different selves, or the conflict that is between the self and the self can intensify and exacerbate. But I just find that to be interesting. And there's also this element with my dad, specifically, that's the closest example I have of these relapses of, my entire life. My dad would go to a rehab after a suicide attempt one time, right? Or in legal trouble. He would go to a rehab to get sober, and there's all the family, especially the first time or two, very hopeful. Oh my God, he's finally doing it.
Yeah.
And then when they fall back, that heartbreak is worse than it was before. And I have to assume on the other side of that, the shame is worse than it even was before. When you do that relapse and you see that the people in your life have been let down, does that resonate with your experience at all?
Absolutely. And it drives one of the most powerful drivers of addiction is hopelessness. Like one of the most powerful, it's in the same way that I feel like, at least for me, one of the more powerful drivers towards suicide is not just sadness, but it's apathy. Like there are plenty of people who are super struggling and they just can't handle their life, and especially with alcohol and addiction. But in a weird sense, they're not hopeless. They're on like this track and they can't seem to get off, and they're just trying to deal with these problems. But they're not actually hopeless. Like they think there's a way. They're maybe just not partaking in it, or they're in delusion or denial, or they're like pushing it off. But weirdly enough, they're not actually like truly hopeless. They're just doing some like mental gymnastics to keep drinking, or to push away the hope that you'll change.
I'll get sober next year or next month.
Right. Yeah. Tomorrow always looks way easier. I have this idea where like there's future David, where like I have so much confidence in future David. Like future David is going to understand what's causing this drinking problem. He's going to take care of this shit. And I'm going to drink now, but there is a David in the future, the near future, hopefully, who he's going to take over this shit. I also fuck over future David a lot, because there's times where I'd be like, oh my God, David, you have to get to work at 8 in the morning. Dude, it is 1 and you're like starting drinking now. And I'd be like, well, that sounds like a future David problem. Even though future David is only like 7 hours away. It's like 7 hours away, David's going to have to deal with that. And 7 hours away, David comes and he's just like, all right, well, you should drink, some more so you're not. It's like, that sounds like really bad when David gets to work at 9:30. That's a 9:30 in the morning David problem. And I think that, that happened a lot with the delusion. Like, some people have delusions that they're not alcoholic, and some people have delusions that I used to think that I used to almost have this like stupid pride where I was like, I'm not as dumb enough to believe I'm not an alcoholic. I just don't care. And, this sense of like, I hate my life and I'm just partaking this thing, but I'm not confused about who I am. And it's like, no, you're still delusional because you don't think in this weird way. You don't think that you're going to keep being this way. You think you'll eventually get better or something. Somehow it's going to happen. Not now, but it will happen. That's just as delusional. It's like you're not. It's like play it out. Like, is this going to any place good? All your history has proven that this only escalates and gets worse. So like, why you should just stop right now. Like, it doesn't show you're ever going to be more ready to quit than you are now. You're never going to, that future David's not coming where I'm ready to quit. Like, at least for me, and I know for most people, that never comes. That this nice idealized version of yourself that's ready to stop.
Right. Because
what? Because something happens, like my daughter got married and I saw the beauty of life and now I'm ready to put it down. Like, no, that doesn't happen, man. Like, you just imagine this future version of yourself that's going to be ready to, and I did that. Like, future David seriously will take care of this. As much as I fuck him over, he's gonna know what to do, man. And it's like,
as much as past and present David have no fucking clue what to do.
Past and present David,
future David will take care of this.
And a massive amount of empirical evidence that shows the future David does not exist. And it's like, yeah, but he's gonna get it.
Yeah. Well, all of that in mind, then I guess the next question is, how did you, eventually come to get sober, and how difficult has that process been looking back over a year?
Yeah. So a big thing for me was that there was so many times, like iterations of me trying to get sober. There was times where the heat on me and I quote unquote had to get sober, but I didn't really want to. And then there was times where I wanted to get sober, but there was no real external thing pushing me towards it. And then there was times where it was like a good way to like illustrate this is that there was times I was going to AA when I was on a court card, when like probation says you have to go to this many meetings a week. There was times where I had to go there and I did not want to go there, or I did not want to really get sober. There was times where I was on a court card and I really did want to get sober. Like, regardless of the law consequences, I really did want to get sober. And then there was times where I wasn't on a court card and I wanted to get sober and they still didn't work out. And what was happening was that through this miserable process of trial and error, I was just at least trying to pick up things that I knew were helping me and drop things that weren't. And what really impeded this process was delusions, even in sobriety, about what was going to help me get sober. Like, I talked about before about, like, if I fix this depression issue, that so much of that was just, I guess, trial and error because you learn something from it, but it just seemed like a waste of time because it was just like you're trying to solve this with the wrong tools and the wrong reasoning. And so you're back to where you're at. And in your mind, you go, I tried everything. And it's like, apparently you didn't. Like, I remember this in a truly masterful event of self-pity. I went to treatment and I had done everything that I thought I was supposed to like stay sober. Like, I was going to meetings and had a sponsor and was doing these other like well-being activities and everything. And I remember I got there and I was just like, dude, I don't fucking understand this, man. I was like, everything you're about to suggest to me in this treatment center, I've been here before. Like, my problem is not a lack of knowledge. Like, I was doing everything I was supposed to. I don't know how I'm here, and I don't know, like, what is even going to stop me. It's like, one of the counselors was like, well, apparently you weren't doing everything you needed to, because here you are. And I was like, fuck you, man. But it was, and it was truly, you can learn lessons. If you're a chronic, like, relapser like I was, you can learn, and relapse is kind of a relative term. When I say that, I have, like, like a year and over a year and 2 months. Like, my longest stint of sobriety was 3 months, and that was with the help of an ankle bracelet, and I eventually would cut off. Yes. And after some Oscar Mayer help, that did not work, by the way.
Okay, I was going to ask you.
For all those listening out there, put down the ham. It's not working. But the thing is that what was important for me was I really, like, honesty was so key because I had to be like, okay, there are things that you don't think are going to work for you, and there are things that you think won't work for you because you kind of don't want to do them. And what is true? Like, there are plenty of things that are suggested by a lot of people. I'm sure we'll cover this in the upcoming topic. There are plenty of things that are suggested of you that just don't work for people, but there are things that might, but people say they won't work because they just kind of don't want to do them. And this, in a sense, this is not a person saying, like, well, I don't want to get sober that much. Like, I'm not willing to do that. Like, in their mind, they really are just like, there's another way I can go about this. Or even something as simple as, like, being able to reach out for help. Like, I'm not going to do that. I'm fine. I don't want to, like, burden anybody, or I don't want to bug it. Or, you know what? I know if I call them, they're not going to say anything that even helps me at all. Like, kind of just doing those things. You're not saying, like, I don't want recovery or I don't want to be sober. You're just saying no. But it's like you haven't even tried it yet. There's no harm in literally trying it. And so I became kind of like the yes man to, like, every suggestion. And then with, like, real honesty, like, assessing if it was helpful or if I didn't want to do it or anything. And a lot of it was a trial and error process to where, you know, I don't think I have it perfectly, and I've struggled a lot, but I've learned a lot of, like, pitfalls of things that I kind of want to do, or things that put me at risk, or being even just very cognizant of being able to know how relapses, like, started. Like, one thing is, it's not even, you know, I talked about, like, chasing that instant gratification in the same way. They're just more, like, acceptable or less harmful things. Another thing that I had learned was just in terms of pure behavior, not anything to do with, like, substances or that reward thing, was if I start lying, I'm pushing more towards relapse. If I just start, like, lying, it has nothing to do with, David, how many energy drinks did you have, or how much have you whacked off, or, you know, anything like that. If I just start, like, lying because I don't want to do something I was supposed to, if I just do that stuff, I can recall that's how, like, relapses started, because I just started getting into this behavior that is in this way, like, acquiescing to the other things that make me go back to it. And just things like, you really have to, again, it takes a lot of honesty to yourself. It's like, things like isolation. I'm a person that, like, really values time by myself, and it just, in whatever context it is, it can be something that's really enjoyable and things I need to do, like writing or meditation or just, you know, whatever. And then there's things where it's really dangerous for me. And I can easily conflate those things. You know, I can easily be like, well, I spend time, like, there's, you know, I just don't want to talk to that person. I don't want to do that thing. I'm going to write, or I'm going to do something. And I end up not actually doing those things. I just don't want to be away from people. And it's totally fine to, obviously, you don't have to be around people, or you don't have to do everything that's asked of you. But really investigating, like, all right, you know what? All right, you can just have this time to yourself, kind of veg out, cool. Let's not make this a habit. So the next time you do this thing, we're going to need to, I guess I'm breaking the thing you just talked about, the inner monologue, but yeah, that's all right. It's also just an easy way to say this stuff.
Of course.
So shut up. And it's like really having that thing of, like, all right, man, I don't know, you did this before, and this could be a start to something. And, like, really pinpointing it there. But just, like, kind of learning. That's really interesting. Yeah, just learning these things about yourself. Something as simple, I know it sounds crazy, and believe me, to be sober, you don't have to carry this hypervigilance with you all the time. But just something as simple as, like, man, dude, I'm tired. I got off work. I'm going to have a nap. And it's like, all right, cool. The next day, I want to have a nap. It's like, how about this? How about you don't have a nap for, like, a couple days from now? Let's just be wary of that. And it's something as simple as that, but that, I think that also goes into, like, things like of mental health for me too. Like, they can be, naps are totally cool. Not anti-nap.
You're right.
But with my predilection towards, like, depression, you know, sometimes that can be something that at least flexes the muscles to start engaging that, starts priming the pump. Right. And just think, like I said, you don't need to have this crazy.
What, to begin to even do a nap every day.
Yes.
To get into the flow of, I'm depending on this thing now every day.
To get into the flow too of just, like, being kind of tired and not examining if are you just actually tired, or just like, I feel like crap. I want to just do a quick time travel here. Just time travel an hour and a half. Starting to do these little behaviors, again, that have nothing to do with alcohol or drugs, but they move towards that. And really just having that awareness that you have to, I mean, God, I hope for all you guys out there that suffer, like, I hope you don't have to do the trial and error I did. But I was also really still wanting to do drugs and alcohol, so I was able to, like, let a lot of these things lapse too.
Yeah.
And
that's incredibly subtle, and I think it does speak to a forced depth of introspection that you've had to go through in this process of addiction and fighting it, to the point where you can start to know your own mechanics so well that even the nap or the wanting, the nap is such a natural thing. Animals do it, right? It's so obvious. People say it's healthy for you, etc. But you can see, like, what I'm really trying to do is escape.
yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so I want to black out for an hour and a half because I feel like shit.
Right.
And then even that can be then the snowball. That's incredibly subtle. And it feels like that level of self-knowledge can only come through a very protracted struggle that is forcing you to become minutely aware of the mechanics that, once they start grinding those gears, are sort of building up that momentum that can then push you back into the substance itself.
Right. And the thing is too is that you also, I think you just get a sense of yourself, and I don't know, there's like at least for me, there was like moods I'd be in where, like, I would just kind of, it would just, anything that had a whiff that smelled of like some of those negative behaviors, that were just a part of my addictive behaviors, just kind of doing things to step away from those. And it may seem like this is a lot of like psychological examination, but I think naturally you come to understand, like, you know when you're being a little bit lazy, or like, oh, I'm going to be selfish, and there's nothing like against those things. But at least when you start in recovery, I would say at least within the first year, you kind of have to be hyper vigilant of those things, just because of what your disability is in this function. If for self-betterment, that's great to do those things, but for what's on the line for alcoholics and addicts, you might want to incorporate that, and at least when you're very vulnerable, like that crazy amount of introspection would go into, especially if I was like in my first month, second month, third month, 4th month, or like I remember around 7 months, I started getting into the mode of what they psychologically called the fuckets, and there was just these little traces of just like, I know what this is, and I tried myself. I was like, this has nothing to do with wanting to do drugs or alcohol. You're just in this mood. And it's like, all right, well, you know what? It's kind of bad anyway, so just not do it. Even if it has nothing to do with drugs and alcohol, just don't do it. It's just like, people are allowed to do it. It's like, dude, you are in a different realm right now. Like, you did this shit for like 15 years. And if you think you've completely changed in 7 months, you're an idiot. Like, this is a great deal. You may think this is unfair, but Jesus Christ, if I had to like work as hard to like get some sense of normalcy for the amount of time I did this shit, that would be unfair. Right, I'd be like, I'm giving up, man. It's like the same thing with the amount of effort you had to put in to like keep up your addiction or the drinking. Like, no way I could put that much effort into being sober. It's like, luckily I don't have to.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredibly, fascinating stuff. I do want to finish or close the loop on just, we've talked about how you've gotten sober and how you've been able to maintain it. On that South Dakota thing, we never fully figured out how you were pulled back from that particular ledge. Talking about being in the hotel, looking at the grain elevator, drinking, not having a plan. How eventually did you get roped back in by family to come back home and not fucking kill yourself?
And so actually, I ran out of money, and I ran out of alcohol, and it's just like, all right, man, are we really gonna do this? And I started walking around, and to be honest, I would love to give some big insight I had or big moment where I could change, but I don't know, man. I was like walking around shoeless. I don't know where my shoes went. It's a tiny fucking hotel. I don't know how I lost them anywhere. It's like they don't even have underneath the bed in this one. It's just like a cement block, but I lost them. I was just walking around. I didn't have any money to pay for the hotel, and I just started like walking around. And I was like, am I gonna go do this? And I just noticed people saw me, and then I saw a cop was driving by. I was like, I don't know. I'm like shoeless in Seattle here. Like I probably don't look very great. Like, and I was just like, I wanted to just sit down. And this was right in the beginning of when shit shut down in the pandemic.
Oh, shit.
And so I walked to this hotel, which was somehow open, and there's this lady in this mask, like, sitting there. And I literally, it probably looked like I was being a dick, but I literally just was like, I pulled my shirt over my head and tried to, like, tie it because I didn't have a mask. And I was like, I was looking at, maybe I'll use a sock. Seriously.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I just sat there, and this lady was just like, do you need help? What can I help you with? And I was just, I don't know, can I just sit down? And she's like, are you all right? And she's like, she was nice enough to be like, I might call the police if you're not all right. And I go, okay. And then eventually they just, they came by and they talked to me and asked me what was going on. And it was at that point, I was
you were drunk at this, or you drunk?
I was still inebriated, yes.
Yeah.
What's crazy is, again, the way tolerancy works is that for some people, the level I was at, they would be absolutely schmammered. I mean, you hear all the time people get to opiates or alcohol where they are drunk at levels when they get pulled over driving. Pretty alert, too, at a limit of like 0.39 or at a limit that would kill another person.
Yeah.
So I would say I was like incredibly drunk to normal standards, but I was still pretty cognizant of stuff at the very least. And when the cop came, I basically was like, all right, well, I'm not... Now it's too late to kill myself. And I don't really, there was still just me just kind of meandering around to where there was these moments where I was like, do it. And I was ready to do it. And I just didn't quite do it yet. There's something in one of the questions I'll address that helped me in terms of that respect.
Okay. Yeah. All right. But then you eventually, that cop got in contact with your family, got you back home. Your family was obviously worried about you.
Yeah.
They couldn't contact you. They didn't have no fucking clue where you were.
Yeah. No one knew where I was.
Well, so I guess we can talk about AA a little bit. I talked about what you've learned, or maybe you want to touch on this, not skip this question, what you've learned about yourself and your addiction. You touched on a lot of that, but is there anything else you want to say before we move on about stuff you've learned about yourself?
I would say for people that are trying to get sober, be ready to. This almost sounds so stupid, but be ready to learn who you are, because if you've been doing this for a long time, like even down to simple stuff, where I was like, I liked doing this thing. Like there was one guy, like me and you went fishing, and I did that drunk, and I did that sober. But there was one guy who's like, I'm a big fisher guy, I love fishing, and then he started doing it sober. He's like, this fucking sucks, man. You know,
Look, that guy's
like,
fun.
I was drinking at work, and I was in sales, and like I was just like, this is fine, like I can do this. And then when I had to start doing it sober, I was like, I can't. Like there's things like that where you just learn, oh, it was only drinking. Unfortunately, with relationships a lot too, there's like, oh no, I actually can't put up with this person. Like there's things you learn, and then there's also like, remember I talked about that the Maslow like inverted pyramid thing. There's when that flips upside down, and then you take out that lower level, and you start to go have a lot of these things like, what do I actually want to do? Like some people are already set in their lives. They're working a job, they have family and things like that, but they're just like, I don't know what I'm interested in. I don't know what I want to pursue. Maybe should I start going to church? Should I start working out? Like, Jesus Christ, man, I'm like 48 and I don't even know who I am. Like that's okay. But you know, that a lot of that comes with it, especially if this has been something that you've done like for a very long time. And in the sense of like learning about myself, I've learned more about myself in what my potential is and what like negative parts are about me too. Like one weird thing is that since being sober, I'm more angry than I am when I was drunk. But at least it's an anger because I give a fuck about things. Right. You know, like I was like, wow, actually, I really don't like this. And wow, that actually, I think, hold on, let me scrounge around in there. I think I have values. Like, what the fuck is this, dude? These things are lame. I have ideals? No. Like, so there's, I don't know, just as a broader thing, people trying to get sober, be ready for that. And one thing is, embrace that. You can use that to a positive way. You can be like, you know what? Let's start over and there's things out there I don't even know that would make me incredibly like fulfilled. And you may surprise yourself with what you're capable of when you're not drinking all the time. Like, actually, you could be pretty capable of shit. Imagine what you've done now. Imagine what you can accomplish if, you know, you don't have to, like, pound a handle of vodka a day.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk a little bit more about advice in a question or two. If you have anything else to say to people out there struggling, we'll get to that in a second. I do want to touch on AA because we've had a few guests over. I've actually had a guest a few years ago who struggled with drinking. I don't, not nearly to the extent that you went through, but they personally found AA unhelpful for various reasons. And I think, your experience might differ. Some people responding to that episode obviously disagreed with it and said that AA was incredibly essential for them personally. And of course, when it comes to something as messy as addiction, there's going to be, as many different ways to solve it as there are people who are undergoing it, just as there's just as many ways of engaging in alcoholism as there are alcoholics, right? Everybody has their own little way of doing it. So, with all of that in mind, what are your personal thoughts and experiences with Alcoholics Anonymous? And has it helped you? Do you find it to be, even as somebody who I'm pretty sure you're an atheist, do you find it to be helpful?
Yeah, well, it's confusing at first. I thought it was Atheist Anonymous, and I was like, oh, no, it's about this.
Wait, what?
It was a fucking stupid joke.
Oh, I lost it.
You claimed me to be an atheist, and I thought, no, we're not even going to. Don't leave that out.
Dave, edit that out.
Let the awkwardness sit in for that. So AA, as I mentioned, I have a ton of experience with it. It was sometimes... I remember there was this one asshole at me. He was like, no one's forcing you to be here. I picked up my court card and held it in the air. I go, hey, what's this? I legally have to be here, man. Like, I have to be here more than you do.
Yeah.
But to the larger point, you will find plenty of personalities like that in AA. You'll find plenty of meetings that are like, dude, I can't express to you. There are meetings I've gone to where I was like, I desperately need to get sober. But if I need to do this to get sober, I'm not getting sober because I hate this shit. Like, the thing is, AA is incredibly valuable to me. But the thing about it is that it's not about the program of it. The funny thing is, for me, what is more important rather than the program is just the venue of it. See, the thing is, what's incredibly important is to be able to have social interaction with others that suffer from these experiences, because the catharsis of it is invaluable. Being able to talk about these things and getting, some people need, especially when they start hitting years of sobriety, maybe they say they need reminders of what they could go back to and things like that. Those things of interacting with other people and addressing your life in accordance to addiction or alcoholism or struggles that you face now, that's so important. And to be honest, for the most part, AA is like the only game in town for that.
Yeah.
And the thing is that, there are some other programs out there. So like I live in Omaha, which isn't like a massive city. It's in, Nebraska, but it's got like 500,000 in population. There's like a week, there's like over 400 AA meetings. For like things like smart recovery, or I forgot what even the other one was called, like a different way of doing it. There was two. I think now one of them's now defunct. There's just no and it's hard to establish. Like, one thing too is, and this sounds like actually a cheap joke, but it's true. It's free. Like, there's not like appointments or co-pays or shit you got to do. Right. That's really important. So it's hard to establish.
It's so rare in the society.
It's hard to establish other programs for this stuff with what? Like, with what funding? Like, with what way can you establish that? So the thing is that, and I feel I have like incredible sympathy for people who live in smaller populated areas and they have like 3 AA meetings a week and they're run by the same people and they don't like those people. That then you would totally be just to be like, dude, AA fucking blows, because that's what you know of it. And there is a lot of meetings I would go to, and this is what I talked about again about like the idea of willingness. I've done some AA meetings, like, dude, I hate this stuff. And it's just like, have you tried others? You're like, no. And it's like, are you sure they're all like that? Yeah. It's like, which ones did you go to? The ones closest to my house. It's like, okay, man. Again, honesty here. What are you actually willing to do? So I would go to other ones, and the difference is the people there, and just how like some people, a lot of AA meetings are really supposedly topic driven, like what the topics brought out to like discuss. And usually it's not. Usually it goes off the rails pretty quickly. People just talk about what they want to talk about. I would go to meetings and I would absolutely hate them because they were just like repetition of like cliches and platitudes. And some people truly like that. And I'm not saying that in a condescending way. Some people truly enjoy that experience. Some were in a church basement and they acted like they were in a church basement. Like they were very, I know a lot of people, me included, had struggled with such a long time for the God part of it. And it's like, no, we call it a higher power. It's like, okay, but we all know what you mean, man. Like, let's not hide the ball here. And, that like, would let that, I'd be like, no, this is bullshit because of that one thing. And yet there were so many meetings I went to where it was never even brought up, but I let that annoy me enough. But the trying different meetings, and if you try meetings in different areas, they reflect kind of like, they reflect a couple of things. One will reflect the culture of the community around it. Like truly with like the church basement ones, and you can imagine in certain parts of Nebraska or in certain more like in other areas, the people surrounding it can actually reflect in the meetings of themselves. So you can get a totally different experience. The other is just the types of meetings that are set up. The people that just, like I joked about, like it's close to my house. Just through random coincidence of people, some get off work around this time and it's close to them. So just types of people go to this meeting, and that may change the whole dynamic of meeting, and it could be a great one. Again, it doesn't really, like there's other things in the program about like reading the big book, which I don't like too much because it's like, okay, it's not a Bible, folks. And then, there's things like sponsorship. Some people hate the idea of, but a lot of it is what you make it. Like there's some people who had idea of sponsorship. I was like, no. And then there was
that was
like,
your original feeling?
Yes, because of the way it was portrayed to me. But then you'll have a lot of people like, no, it's not like that at all. That person's a fucking idiot. Yeah. And then you just have there's a lot of different ways that you can exercise it. And there's some people, you can go to meetings where they make it seem like this is what it's about. And then it's so funny. If you go to a different one with different people, you can be like, oh no, they're full of shit. Like there's plenty of people that are like, I hate those meetings over there. I hate those people. I hope they drink again. And the thing is that, to a broader level, what I was talking about before about the venue, if you could do it on your own in a different way, Godspeed and higher power blessed, but for the most part, honestly, if you would have been able to do that, you probably would have been able to do that by now. Most of us love doing stuff on our own terms. So if you were able to get sober on your own terms, again, whatever. But and I just think it's important. Like it's great in my life that interacting with people in that way. And like so, I wouldn't say that to kind of explain it. AA is not this huge part of my life and what has helped my sobriety. The meetings I go to, those meetings are the huge part. Those people,
the sense of community,
right? And I mean the particular meetings too. I don't even mean like the
particular communities,
right? I mean those, like I go to 3 AA meetings a week now. After like a lot of searching, I found 3 ones that I totally love, and it's those people there. Like some people like bigger meetings. I don't like those. Like I like these smaller meetings I go to. And again, this is my preference. Other things certainly help other people, but in my preference, I like these because they're more like a support group, and you get to carry the story. You get to check in on how people are doing in their lives. It creates like some sense of accountability too, because people want to see you there. Some people actually call you if they haven't seen you in 3 weeks and they haven't heard from you. They'll be like, "Hey, is everything cool?"
It's the same people too.
It's the same people, and unfortunately, it's okay. It's like a roster of about the same starters, and then you get a lot of people that jump on and off. And that's who I was too. I go to one meeting now where it's nice in this weird way. I was constantly back and forth. Would go for like a month, and then was out for like 2 years, and then would go, and I'd see these people, and they always welcomed me back. Like there was a sense of belonging. I go to another one that I now chair, and this is interesting. It was like advertised as like a free thinkers meeting, like secular thought or different thought. You can even talk about like Buddha if you want. I know, one of those weird brown gods you can talk about. I mean, we all know the one that's white with the beard is correct, but you could even entertain us with your weird folklore.
The white blue-eyed guy is the real guy.
Yeah. I mean, you can talk about your incorrect gods, and it was advertised by like that, and I loved that meeting, but it wasn't like we have like a different, like there's AA literature you can do to like discuss a topic. We have a book that's completely different. Like it will just have like passages from like, you know, Nietzsche or Bruce Lee or Jung or just even one of those weird stinky brown guys, like Buddhist guys. But the meeting isn't good because we discuss those things. Most of the time we don't even discuss what we just read about. It's been good because the free thinkers thing, or the one that's kind of different and less orthodox, the type of people it attracts. People that are looking for a different way attracts like a group of people that you happen, you know, like I said, unfortunately, there's a super high turnover rate. You'll see people, you'll get really close, you know, learn their story, and then they'll be gone. And, you know, there's a lot of people where they're on because of a court card, and they're like, no, I'm really, really, you know, alcoholic, and I need this in my life. And then when they get off it, they're gone. And
the moment there's no more force.
Yeah, which is, you know, dude, totally fine. I'm not like, you traitor, or you left me. No. But the idea, again, it wasn't even about like the program of it, just the type of people it attracted to it made it like into this great meeting. It wasn't even about from the book we read from or what it's about. It was just, it attracted these types of people. So that's what's made it a great meeting. And there's so many variables that can do that. And so the thing about AA is that you can find a lot that do that of stuff you really don't like. And you can have experiences that are really negative because of that. If you can find my biggest suggestion would be like, man, if you can replicate that social interaction, the therapeutic nature of discussing with people about your life in terms of, you know, alcoholism and addiction, if you can find that anywhere else, dude, totally go for it.
Because that's what it's about.
That's what it's about.
That community, that support.
There's like step work you can do. Like I work the steps, I guess you could say, but really it's just like meeting with a person and just talking about the subject. And that's not to say there's like good principles and ideas in like a 12-step program, of course, but like, you know, it's more about it's just bringing people to at least have the conversation, so to speak. Like it's not even about like going through this doctrine of stuff. It's just like the fact that it's a venue for people to be able to do that. Like honestly, I wish there was like an AA type of thing for like mental health stuff.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
Like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's just call it like a 12-step program for depression, or which is like we admire that we are powerless over depression, and just so it's something accessible that you could have people come and talk about. I would fucking love that. And again, you could literally just replace alcohol with depression, have your big book and whatever. Yeah. It wouldn't make any fucking sense, and it would be stupid, but it would get the job done. It would be available to people, and it would bring people together to do that.
Dude, that would be that. I think that's a amazing idea. That would be so helpful. There's periods of my life, as you might know, where I've had extended periods of extreme mental health suffering, of anxiety and depression, daily, crippling, and literally I wanted help, not even medicine necessarily, but therapy, to talk to a professional. I could not afford it. So, you know, all through my 20s, and even now I don't have health care, if I go through mental health crisis, the idea that I could go get help is not even on the table. No, you cannot afford medicine. You can't afford weekly therapy sessions. You got to grind this out yourself. And just having a community of people to go to, in a society in particular where nothing is fucking free and all sense of community has been systematically disbanded, you know, and privatized, and everybody's a neoliberal individual subject now, having a place where you can go for free and get a sense of community is anathema. I mean, that in and of itself is sort of countercultural in its own right. And I think a lot of the confusion about do you support AA, do you not support AA, comes down to treating it like a monolith. You know, like it's one thing, but what you're saying here is it's as different as the community and the individual meeting is, and that's what really shapes, you know, what you can get out of it. You can go to terrible ass AA meetings, terrible, you know, communities or certain people that have an emphasis of something that does not resonate with you, but that's not AA failing. You just got to go find the right thing. So if somebody's out there that has been to an AA meeting or two, has found it not helpful or alienating or off-putting, your suggestion might be keep poking around, keep trying to find a meeting that might speak to you specifically.
Right, and like the funny thing is, I'm being pro AA without being pro AA in the sense of like, to me, it's like it's truly beautiful to see something in society where people that are getting off work, where you have like white collar people blue collar dudes. You put if you want even, you put $1 in a bucket thing, and that's all you gotta do, and you don't even have to do that. And they weirdly enough all have same issues with something. Weirdly, there's no sense of class or race or demographic. It doesn't affect, and it's actually accessible. So now we're not separated from this with private meetings we have to pay for. We can all talk about this. And I think it actually destroys that when some meetings, and this is my own opinion, but when some AA meetings are so structured in a sense like that, it's destroying the sense of what makes it great and beautiful. And it's just but no, this was written in the doctrine. I was fuck your doctrine, dude. This is about helping people, and it's nowhere else. It's, you know what, if you really don't like it, then I don't know, join a Facebook group or something, or try to find you can meet with people. Because of COVID, there was so many Zoom meetings, and that's interesting because some people, that does not resonate with them all. They're I don't like this one bit, and I don't blame them. If there's there's some with 80 people on and your screen's off, it's just you're just hearing ramblings into the night. I don't know. It wouldn't seem like that for me. But if you can create a smaller one that you could talk with people, or one that's themed. I haven't looked too much into it because I didn't need to for a while. And I like so much the interaction in person, just to be able to see someone, be in the same room with them, Oh, yeah. But you could certainly, it would break down to stuff especially if you wanted to share some of the same demographics of people, LGBTQ people that have that same problem. They find community in that. So, and the other thing about the one last thing I'll say too is you also have to recognize that some reasons they're shaped like that is actually through an inconsequential or an indirect filtration system of a lot of people that get sober or that go to them a lot are just older people. And if there's things that that's why I think it's also hard for a lot of younger people to, when they're trying to get sober, there's such a disconnect between some 65-year-old dude who has 20 years and a young fellow who's 23 and all his friends are still out partying and drinking, and he's trying to be sober. It's just I don't know, man, your words are nice and it sounds good, but dude, I always felt way even right now I feel more connected to the person who's still out there just drinking away and wants to get sober than I do with a person who has 20 years sobriety.
Because you're closer to that side of the
I would, in a weird way, I would much rather want to talk with that as long as they weren't sloshed, which I've been on helplines where people call me and I need help, man. I'm here, I'm here to listen. It's can you drive me to Taco Bell? I'm nope. But you know what I mean? That there's also weird ways. I guess I'll go back. It's just the idea of the community that it's around. Even too, I liked later night meetings because you get just certain types of people that would go to them. There was a while I went to some of the NA meetings just because I liked kind of the type of people in that particular location around that community that went to them. So, a lot of people don't have that. Like I said, when I sympathy for the person in the smaller town, they don't have that option because there's just not that much variety of where to go. And I did a video about this where I talk about how to maybe remedy that, but also what issues can cause or be attributed to just not having the selection.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Are you a sponsor of somebody?
No.
Do you have to be you have to be sober for a certain amount of time to become eligible to be a sponsor, or how does that work?
Again, this is what's beautiful. A lot of people will be absolutely, and some people are no.
Okay.
It's no.
Even that's dependent on
at least on with one group I'm in, I had to be sober for a year to chair the meeting, and there was that. But I don't even think I had a year before I started doing it. I just what's funny? I had some people when I was earlier. They would be hey man, kind of like what you said, would you be my sponsor? And I'd be how many months do you have? I was well, I have about 4 months. I was well, you have more than me, so probably not. I would blind lead the blind. I would happily take on a sponsor. But again, the meetings I go to, because they work for me, there's some influx of people, but there's not a lot either. So I may not have a lot of what you'd say opportunities, but they're the meetings I like to go to. They're what helpful, so I'm not gonna
makes sense.
Draw away from that.
Absolutely. So I know you touched on this a little bit, but is there any more advice or any specific advice that you would give to anyone out there listening right now who is struggling with alcohol themselves? And then we'll talk about advice for people who have family members struggling, for a third person perspective.
Yeah.
But for somebody out there who's struggling with an addiction or alcoholism themselves right now, what advice would you give to somebody? As hard as that question is.
No, it's all right. This is going to seem very weirdly like singular, but it's. I mentioned earlier I'd reference this. If the one thing, there's a lot of things I won't say super like concretely because of how much variables there is in this shit, but honestly, if you're really struggling with alcohol in particular, if you have a firearm in your house, like if you aren't depressed, you're just really struggling with it. If you're like my life sucks or this is really hard, but I'm not suicidal or anything like that, you know. And you could totally have justifiable reasons that you want to have one or that you like to have one, or that you need to have one. And this is no stance on any gun. I don't anything about guns at all. But if you are really struggling, again, you may not feel suicidal at all, but I would just seriously recommend you get the firearm out of your house
because it's too easy. That split second.
And there's these weird things that can happen in your mind with drinking where you can get into this very dark and fatalistic place out of like nowhere. And, you know, there's also things just too more practically, like if you do get pretty blotto and you can do stupid things or there's accidents, like stuff like that, you know, just like fucking around with it or not knowing, you know, like with drugs too. You know, so I'm not saying it so much because like you're going to think the mailman's a CIA agent
sure,
and start shooting at them. But, you know, something could happen. I say this specifically more with alcoholics, at least in my experience, is that those weird shifts or those very irrational, impulsive things is a threat to doing something irreversible. And what I was saying when I was like talking about South Dakota, yeah. I truly, honestly believe that if I was just a firearm owner for whatever reason, or if I was a hunter or something, I would not be alive.
Fuck.
So sorry, I wasn't like, you know what, start working out, start doing the keto diet or something. Mine is more like, don't blow your brains out.
Absolutely, but I think that is important because it just becomes so fucking easy in a moment of insanity or desperation or just, you know, those moments when you want to crawl the fuck out of your skin, or as you said earlier, I want to fucking disappear. Mm-hmm. And if it's just right there and it's so totalizing in its ability to wipe you out, that's obviously
well. And remember, we talked about those like crazy ways we get talked into things from seemingly out of nowhere, like, you know, in a jokey way about like the laughing at, you know, the lunch meat thing, and then 20 minutes later in the grocery store, you know, that's a funny version of it. There's also that I've experienced a lot of very not funny versions of that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that you can't. The problem is that you may say to yourself, again, nothing against like gun ownership, but you may say to yourself, well, I'm not going to do that. It's like you're saying that you're going to have like a pattern of something you won't do and something that has made you cross everything you said you wouldn't.
Yeah, great point. Anything else?
Yeah. Okay. Something less fucking dark. I would what I'd recommend, and there is people that, this is going to sound crazy, but there's people that may be like listening that are really struggling with alcoholism but have no plans on quitting, and that may seem weird. It's like, why would you listen to something like this? And I totally understand it because I did that too. Like, there's almost a weird like self-flagellation I think some people do. Well, they'll watch like Intervention or something like that. Maybe it's because it's like it's comforting to see someone struggling with what I'm doing. I'm not alone in all the crazy, embarrassing, shameful things. Or honestly, just because we're humans, like, at least that person's worse, you know. Or just listening to stuff about recovery when I had no plans of doing it. If there's anybody out there that is you know, that's like that, and you don't have really any plans of quitting at all, but you know it's just destroying you. You know, I would hope the best for you, and I hope that at the very least in your mind, you don't have to wait for a rock bottom, and you don't have to wait for something to go wrong. Like it, in the most part, if you're an alcoholic like I am, just keep in mind it will get to that point. And if I was listening right now, I'd be like, fuck this guy. I hate this now, more with the jokes and stuff. Like, but it's just, it's something I feel like I have to say. And if not, like I said, just at least do the very precautions. It may seem simple, but like, you know, just be careful. If you're going to keep, drinking, just be careful with anything that you reasonably can. Something like the firearm, or not like volunteering for things where you put other people, in risk. Like if it was just like driving, your friends' kids somewhere just because you want to keep up appearances, you offer to do it. Like, don't do that. And I've done those like horrible things where I wanted to like look like I was appearing normal. Like, at least cut those out of your life. Like, if you're going to keep drinking, that's fine, but just watch out for that type of stuff. And I'm only saying that because I know I've done that too. Because I'm trying to prove myself that I can be a functional alcoholic. For people that are really trying to quit or find recovery, I would say one of the some people offer this suggestion of like, try to sabotage yourself. So try to go out and tell people you're struggling with it. So now they know it. So now, like, if you start trying to do it, you're kind of sabotaging yourself. Problem
Making
is
it a little harder. You're setting yourself up to have a little more pressure on you.
Yeah, and that can sometimes only just lead to like. There's totally been times where I did that, and like 5 minutes, I'm like, "Fuck, I'm an idiot."
Yeah.
Like, God damn it. There's been times where I showed my girlfriend where my bottle was, and like literally 3 hours later that night, I was like, "Damn it!"
Yeah.
But I would say one thing is, beyond all the stuff that you'd normally hear, try to positively satisfy yourself. So try to involve yourself in things where you're around people, like one, to try to get rid of like isolation. And it doesn't have to be anything recovery related. Try to just involve yourself where you have some thing that it makes you a part of other people and people expect you to be there. So it can seriously be anything like a book club, or it could be something where
Bowling league.
Project with some friends you have with work, or it can, if you have just some sort of social interactions that like have you're like, I got to go to that. Like even you may just blow that off and you're like, all right, I'm not going to do that anymore. Just try at least those things. This is just advice I'm giving that wouldn't be like what you'd normally hear, like the bear, like, try AA, try this stuff, all that stuff.
Exercise, get good sleep.
Yeah. And also one other thing, there is not a book or a video series or instructional thing that is going to save you. So there's a lot of those things that are offered to alcoholics and addicts, and it's not going to save you. There's things that can open your mind, but if there's anything that says this is going to save you, leave them a bad comment and move on, because that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Now, anyway, subscribe to my video series.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit, because I think, it is true, though, but that in moments of, let's say, even when I'm struggling with, I'm deep in an anxiety episode, or I'm deep in a depressive episode, one of the things that helps the most is literally, and it doesn't even make that much sense, is just, as you said earlier, to tap into other people struggling with that. So I'll often find myself like on forums with anxiety.
Yeah.
And just as I'm anxious, I'm reading about other people's anxiousness, and that alone, they're not offering me solutions, but just to know that you're not alone in what you're struggling can just give you that little bit of breathing space, that little sense of like, okay, maybe this, it's not just me and I'm personally fucked up, but this is actually a human thing. Other humans are going through this, and there's just some comfort, some genuine comfort in just engaging with those voices. And on your YouTube channel that you started recently, No Chaser, which we'll link to in the episode, and we can talk a little bit more as we wrap this up about that. It's one of those options. Somebody who's been through the shit and particularly desperate, dark, and intense forms of addiction, opiate, and then an extended alcohol. There's wisdom that is gained through that suffering. And just engaging with that and listening to that can be comforting, can be also instructive, and can sometimes be that little light at the end of the tunnel that can help you start getting your own shit together and moving towards sobriety yourself. So I think that those things are very helpful.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the joke I was kind of making about like the people, like something that says it will save you. Like if there's things that give you more information or give you an idea of the experience or just like, things like that, then that's totally cool. What I mean is there's unfortunately a lot of things out there that'll be like, this is what they don't want you to know about. Like that, you should already be able to spot it. I don't mean to insult any of your guys' intelligence. You should the problem is it's so appealing to be like, oh, this is something I can incorporate. And this will, if it advertised that, it will change everything. I mean, you're totally right. Like even something as silly as like, especially with mental illness stuff, like a meme group about it. Like,
yeah, for real.
Even is a weird amount of comfort in that. That's totally right. But like, understand the biggest point I wanted to make with that is that a lot about getting better is it's an inside job. It's something you're gonna have to do a lot by yourself. And I would just say you get the help from others. So back to the suggestion of like positively sabotaging yourself. Give yourself like social commitments.
Yeah. Very, very helpful. Now, somebody who has somebody in their life, they themselves are not struggling with addiction or alcoholism, but somebody very close to them who they love deeply is, and that is a very wrought territory, especially if you yourself have never gone through it, because a lot of people turn to, like, if I just shame them enough, if I give them ultimatums, then, you know, either you stop or you're out of my life, sort of thing, then that's tough love, and that's what the addict needs. Personally, maybe that's worked for some people. I've found that is not at all conducive in the people in my life that have alcoholism. That has never been particularly helpful. I could be wrong. I mean, you might disagree with me, but what would you say to somebody who has an addict in their life that they really want to help?
All right, so yeah, I'll break this down in, because I think it varies a little bit, because you could be talking about, like, you know, people that are within your life and people that you are dependent on in your life too. I mean, that's really important. I would say, you know, actually, my mom's approach was really good, and she didn't, like, consciously, like, construct it. I think it's just kind of the way she was that she was like, you know, because the other side of, like, the ultimatum stuff is, like, being an enabler, right? Like,
sure.
Letting it, like, continue. And the way she kind of did things was that, like, as long as you are trying, even if you fail, as long as you're trying, as long as, like, if I come up to you and you can verbalize what you're at least what you plan to do, as long as, like, I talk to you and there's, like, evidence of things you're at least attempting, like, you know, as long as you're making efforts, I will support you. If you keep failing, you know, but you're still trying to do something, if you're just isolating and you're still just drinking, then no. If I talk to you about what your game plan is and you have no idea and you haven't thought about it, then you're out. If you are lying about something like that, actually, if I ask you to do something and you admit that you just hadn't been working on it and you actually sound remorseful, that is actually a form of trying, because you're being honest when it's hard to be. Doing that, like, the idea, I think, is really good too. I will support you if you are trying, but the moment that you just stop, then we're done. Like, if you have to be harsh, because a lot of people, it's just like that tough love is like they don't have any sort of recourse. It's like, what am I going to do? Yeah. I think that kind of idea to it is if you're trying and you see someone support you, it can be very helpful, because you don't feel as alone, and it's someone that's encouraging you to keep you honest as well, and without saying you need to do this, and without saying you're out if you do this. One of the worst things I would say, honestly, is that, yeah, ultimatums can be not helpful. The only thing worse than, like, an ultimatum is an ultimatum you back away from. Like, one of the worst problems is that people, I've talked with people where they've made ultimatums, and again, we mentioned this earlier about, like, the way that alcoholics and addicts can kind of, not only in their mind, but, like, give excuses or give reasons. They can be super convincing, and it can almost appear convincing. But if you set down an ultimatum, no matter what they tell you, you can't back out of it. You have to be like, you can't allow them to make an amendment to the ultimatum retroactively. Right. And they will try every which way. Believe me, like, alcoholics and addicts are like the fucking octopi. Like, you know, the way that they can get through a hole as long as it's as big as their beak?
Yeah.
We will fucking squirm through that keyhole, just making sure we fit our beak in, which is the alcohol. Just making sure we can fit that in and to give any reasoning. So if you set one, literally, again, this goes back to, let's say you're dependent on someone. If you set someone and you say you're going to be out, when you do it, already have the plan of how you're going to get out. And even better, verbalize that to them. Be like, I'm going to do this and this. I'm taking the kids and I'm going to my mom's, or I'm leaving you. I've already looked at other apartments. I'm going to move in with my sister for a little bit and then get to a part. Like, tell them and be ready to do it. Yeah. When you are creating it, be as ready to do it as you are when you say it. That, you know, as far as, like, someone that you know that's in your, like, you know, maybe someone, unfortunately, people that have known that you work with, or a good friend of yours. You know, honestly, I think one thing that can be helpful in a non-judgmental stance, tell them, if really make an assessment, and sounds kind of weird, but really make an assessment if telling them, and it will make things worse if you're willing to do that. Like, some people, like, honestly, I got away with it at work. I thought I was being so sneaky. As long as I was keeping up, like, you know, using breath mints and spray, as long as I was keeping up the appearance, I was at least trying to hide it. I think they were happy with that. Yeah. But, like, it was like, as far as what things were going, it was fine with them, and there wasn't a reason to. I think, honestly, with the weird sense, people, alcoholics and addicts, have, like, a weird pride that they are very clever. They're pulling the wool over everyone's eyes. Sure. I had that too. Let's be real. I was not doing it through like clever techniques. I was basically bludgeoning them with the reality of like, it's going to be shittier for you if you come at me with this. Yeah. Literally, it was just a lot of my relationship was a staring contest of like, who is going to blink first. Like, I was told afterwards in long conversations I've had when I was sober, it's just like, there were so many times where I was just like, it's a good night. I like this movie. Like, you're fucking drunk, but I'm not going to bring it up. Like, I don't want to ruin my night. Like,
right, yeah.
You're not getting away with shit for the most part.
Right.
Like, so if there's a person like, I don't know, I would suggest, if you really care about them, if you're going to let them know the full extent. Because there's some people that honestly will think like, oh, they caught me because I was like too drunk this night. And be like, no. I've known the full way. Give them at least some perspective. Because maybe that too will be like, if I'm not tricking them, I'm probably also not tricking a lot of people. Because a lot of people are under that delusion. Just because they're not saying it to you does not mean they don't know. And especially in families, there is a lot of that hear no evil, see no evil. Just because that's the only way you can keep up appearances. Like, what? You have like a knife through your face that you can't take out. And would you keep complaining about the knife in your face? Like, that's a horrible analogy. But like in the sense that why bring it up if you don't think anyone's going to stop? Right. And in the reality is that you just have to with your relationship with that person, you have to be willing and imagine the consequences. Every single time, imagine, what if they don't do it? And be prepared that if you do express to them how you feel and what you know about what they've been doing or how you wish them stop, you have to be prepared that it will be a fruitless endeavor, which is really harsh, but that is the truth. And it's not because they hate you either. Believe me, life fucking sucks. They would stop if they could too. Yes. And just, I think, have those realities in mind if you're going to approach someone. Or if you're thinking about it, just go, okay, am I going to be mad if it doesn't come to anything? Am I going to be like, do I want an apology? What do I want for doing this? Do I just want them to get better? Really examine those things and think of the outcome either way. Think about if they stop and then what you want from it, and think about if they totally don't. And by the way, almost put your money on the fact that they won't, and how it will affect your relationship from that point.
Yeah, really, really good advice. I think the parent-child relationship is a particularly difficult one. Either way. Yeah. So for me, like looking up at my dad, who has now passed away due primarily to his alcoholism, there was a sense my entire life that there was nothing I could really do, that my only choice regarding his addiction was whether or not I was going to kick him out of my life or accept him in my life given the fact that he's an addict. Yeah. Right? There's no ultimatum. Like, I knew I was not going to be able to talk my dad out of drinking. I had no power over what my dad did. Nothing that I was going to do was going to affect that at all. So then the only choice I had is, how do I respond? Do I exclude him or do I embrace him fully with love and compassion, even though I goddamn well know that he's not going to fucking stop? I chose the latter, just to love him until the very last second. I told him, when he would feel shame and he would try to hide the drinking, like, don't even worry about that. I love you no matter what. My love is unconditional for you. And, maybe you could call that enabling, but I just felt like I didn't have the power to enable or not enable. He was going to do what the fuck he was going to do 100%, and only thing I had control over is my relationship to him. Now, that's a son looking up to a father, so there's a certain dynamic there. And I think that gets even more complicated when it's reversed. Oh, yeah. When it's your own child.
Right, because there's a lot of people I know in AA particularly where, we talked about before the nature of the systematic, family tree of drinkers that become drinkers. It's funny, they almost break down to it's people that become alcoholics themselves, or they absolutely don't touch the stuff. And it's who's ever guessed to what's going to happen. But yeah, that's particularly hard, but a lot of them deal with that. And basically when they become adults, you talked about enabling, and I think I totally appreciate your choice of what you've done. I can also appreciate the other side of it. I can't have him in my life because it's too painful to watch. Then if that's what's best for you, you gotta. That's what you have to do too. True. The other point that I wanted to get to was the idea that enabling, in the sense, is I would say enabling is only if they find a means to continue their addiction through you. Your dad was going to, you weren't enabling by allowing him to drink out in the open because he was going to do it anyways. Now that enabling idea is really actual territory of trickiness when it comes to the parent to the child that has it. Because you actually do have means over them, which normal people do apply to their child anyways, but their means of like providing them financial support or, just a place to be or just stuff like that, doing them errands or helping them out with something. That's what normal parents do for children, but in the nice, awful world of alcoholism addiction, we can always use that shit for our means. And so it blurs the lines, too, of like, well, what the fuck can I do for him? Like, he needed that money for books. Like,
right. So and when it's your kid, too, there's an extra layer of there's no option on giving up. Like, I'm not excluding my kid from my life. Like, I'll exclude my parents or my friend or even my spouse. I'll divorce them and walk away from them, right? Because their impacts are so brutal on my life, I cannot take it. But with a kid, it's almost like if you're a parent of a child, no way. That is not an option for me to like, okay, you're on your own. Fuck you. I need you out of my life because it's too hard. I think a lot of parents just become enablers through the brute force of not being able to tell their own kid to fuck off.
Oh yeah, it's truly cruel. Like, I would say one of the, again, I'm normally a cynical person, but one of the more beautiful things I had found and through my struggles with the amount of love that my mom had. And she had said something that was incredibly, some people could have absolutely taken the wrong way, but it was incredibly meaningful to me, where I remember when I was coming up on a year, we were just talking and I was like, damn, it'll be, she asked like, it's going to be like a year soon? I was like, yeah, in like 2 weeks it'll be a year. She was like, wow. And I was like, did you ever think I would make it? And she was like, no, honestly, no. And immediately the brain could just be like, what, she didn't believe in me? And it's like, no, that actually makes what she did for me more beautiful. Because in spite of the fact that it looked absolutely hopeless, she continued to offer those efforts. That's actually more loving to me than not, quote unquote, believing in me, because even though it was going to be for naught, she still exercised it without any hope. Like that was probably one of the most meaningful things I ever heard, because it was like, even in the sense like, this is a failed project, it's done, you were right to give up. Even if she expected no better result, she still did it because she just had to. God damn.
Yeah, your mom is a real hero, based on what little I know about her staying in your corner during all this.
Yeah. She liked you. She always liked you, too.
Even though she had to come drive me home after the mushroom car accident?
It's all right,
Yeah, so I think that those are the questions for today. And, there's so much, detours we could take or other things we could talk about. Let me sort of, last question before we talk about your YouTube channel is, like, you mentioned earlier, you referred to this recent stretch of sobriety as this stretch, right?
Yes.
And there's a sense of an alcoholic, like, I'll never not be an alcoholic.
Yeah.
How confident, and this is kind of a tough question, how confident are you in the here and now with your ability to maintain and continue the sobriety that you've worked so hard for?
Yeah, well, the thing, remember I was talking before where the absolute disheartening nature of having some sobriety and then losing it. And I was talking about the deja vu of like, what's different now? Oh, I don't know. I've been here before. What has made me hopeful is that it is not through things that I've been able to accomplish or things that I have. Like, it's nice to have, like, I've gotten a better job and I've made my relationship better and I've been able to do this activity and go on this. Like, it's not through those things. It's that when we were talking about earlier, those deeply ingrained mechanisms of your mind and how those things are, what the actual difference I felt from this length of time and over this time is that I actually am like seeing things in a different light. And when we talked about even those things of like catching myself maybe napping too much or those things, I've found an ability to not only spot them but to actually be able to take action to them. And there were so many times I was sober and I was just totally white-knuckling it. I was more miserable than I was when I was drinking, honestly. And there was times where I had real hope just because things around me were changing and I was getting positive results. But I feel confident, at least just for now, that I actually feel like shifts in my mind about how I perceive the way that I'll find happiness, about how I'll find fulfillment in my life. Like, the attraction I talked about to that single goal mindset, or to be able to control what makes you feel a certain way, or to do all these things. I've eroded away at those notions and have been open to pursuing other things. And that, I know we talked about before, a huge part is that due to other things that I've been able to pursue with being sober, like meditation, things like that. It's opened up different avenues to make real internal changes that I was simply not capable of making before. And to put it bluntly, I think in different ways now than I had before. It's still a lot of it similar. Almost 90% similar, but there's a 10% difference that's incredibly important. That's the best way I can put it. I don't know. I could drink tomorrow.
But every day that, or as your sobriety gets longer and longer, does it become easier and easier?
So what's funny is that there's things that become easier. Like you talk about your bare, moving from ground zero things. Like you talk about dealing with cravings, or you talk about the obsession and compulsion. Some people that it's weird. Some people that apparently it just drops away quickly. Sometimes it doesn't do it at all. But you get hit with certain things. And when I talked about the habits that you have, you've become vulnerable in certain spots. So it comes upon you in a way where you're not thinking about drinking, you're not doing stuff, but you become vulnerable in a way to where you eventually do it. And for some people, the years in that respect don't matter as much sometimes. It certainly helps to have that established amount of years, but they can become complacent and then they're just kind of hanging on. One of the, I did a video about this, and one of the scariest things in recovery is when people that have multiple years go back out. And this happened a lot during COVID. And it was frightening because there's a part of you where no, I get it. I'm once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. But in your brain is this shit ends sometime, right? I can, dude, I'm going to be in the clear 10 years. I'm not in the clear. What the fuck, man?
When I'm 60, I'll be good, right?
Dude, one of the scary, most frightening things was Philip Seymour Hoffman died after half a year of using after a 23-year sobriety chain. And you're just
God.
Does it ever end? And when you listen, those are the people I'm always the most fascinated. People in treatment that I went with that had 8 years, I wanted to talk to them out of a curious, morbid nature, but also, I don't know, just what?
Yeah.
And what it comes down to is the as far as confidence level, you get a certain buffering of defenses, before you would relapse or go back out. A buffering of security because of the stuff that you've built up. But the problem is that can wear away, but it doesn't wear away so explicitly. It doesn't wear away because you're thinking about drinking or you're starting to fantasize more. Certainly that can come, but the erosion can happen under not completely unconscious, but it can happen under what you'd expect it to be, where you can be in a rut and then it can come back out. And I guess the whole point is anyway, you're just supposed to focus where you're at right now. So you're not supposed to mind yourself to things of that nature, how long you're not supposed to think about those things, but I think it's important to think about those things as terms of being able to recognize self-awareness that you need, and self-awareness that you need to carry about yourself.
Totally.
Just it's good to ask yourself, am I in a rut? How will I be able to keep going? How long will I do this? And it just depends. Well, I feel like this now. I think I'm pretty confident. What if I feel differently in the future? Will I be able to recognize that?
Yeah, very subtle stuff, very complex stuff, and that goes back to the naps and the lying and being very hyper conscious of that slippery slope, the very first step on that slope, and trying to learn how that can then avalanche into this other thing. Yeah, it's fascinating. Talk about your channel, the No Chaser YouTube channel. What do you do on it? Why'd you start it? What do you want to accomplish with it?
Yeah, so basically there was a lot of times where I just honestly I kept thinking I wish there was a channel for someone like me. And I don't even know who me was but, and this is totally no offense to any other channels or things of this nature, but they seem to fall into two categories of one being very scientific or medicinal or educational, which is great. I mean, the information is awesome. Yeah. And then other ones went into this category of super just promotional and rah cheerleading, which is also important, and people love that, and they'll probably love it way more than my shit, which is totally great.
Yeah.
But with this channel, it's for people that are still drinking or are in active addiction, people that are new to recovery, people that aren't, people that are family members or friends, and people that are just curious to get into the mind, to like, you just see from the outside or even from yourself the crazy things that happen or the choices you make, or how do you fall along this? How does this path even continue? How does this stuff even happen? Like, what it tries to provide at least is some explanation of how you get to that point. Like, you know, I made some videos about, you know, one like particularly about AA, but then there was another one about how like relapses begin and how a lot of it deals with delusional thinking. And I tried to like break that down, where it's just like, you know, there's so many times where just like you weren't doing the things that are working and you took your foot off the accelerator, and it's just like, no, it's so much deeper than that. And I basically try to go through these topics regarding, and I'll try to expound more just in different areas, but I try to go through these topics to give like an in-depth idea of like, this is how it works, and it makes sense to us at this time, and this is why, or this is like a something that I've done. And I try more, you know, the videos I'm working on now to inject a lot of my experience into it, some funny, some not, you know, some things to just illustrate how the mind works as well too. And I try to make it, you know, something where it offers a perspective that maybe someone has been yearning for, because it's not simply just a motivational one, and it's not simply just like your scientific educational one either.
Right. Kind of like that free thinker meeting that you found. It has a certain approach for a specific sort of addict, and that's what you're trying to provide. And
it's just unorthodox in nature. It's not even about like the literature that's in it or anything like that. It's just from a way of without telling people this is how addiction is, or this is how it works. You know, this is how it works scientifically, or this is what you need to do. I try to go at a completely non-judgmental approach of like, this is how stuff worked in my mind and with people I've known and all the testimony I've heard of others and people just in my life and through the communities that I've been a part of. Like, these are the similarities I've picked up. And when you explore them a little bit deeper, you can see why they create alcoholics and addicts, why they manifest, and why they continue it. And again, I say it's for like other people that know someone that's suffering, is that you can be told, you know, alcoholism and addiction is just a harrowing affliction that's hard to break up. But for some people, they're like, no, he cheated on me again, or he's not taking care of my kids. I don't care about that term. Why? And I try to answer some of those questions like, this is why, again, in an insane way, the crazy makes sense.
All right. Yeah, No Chaser on YouTube. I will link to it in the show notes. Dave, you're a long time friend. We grew up together. We went through the most formative years of our lives as best buds. You'll always be a best friend of mine, a brother of mine, until we both fall into our grave. But I really appreciate you coming on. Your authenticity, your humor, it shines through, and it makes this conversation, a difficult one, easier to engage with when you can have that sort of that dark humor that has always been a character trait of you. Yeah. It really comes into wonderful work when it comes to this very difficult topic and this whole chunk of human existence, the human condition itself. So thank you so much for coming on Rev Left and helping my audience just get some insight into your personal struggles and the wisdom that has come out of that. We're obviously all pulling for you. You're welcome back anytime. But yeah, man, congratulations on over a year sober. And I just love you, man. I love knowing that you're okay and that you're turning around and trying to help other people. It's a beautiful thing.
I appreciate it, dude. I truly appreciate, all jokes aside, letting me be on here and, you know, speak to your audience. It means a lot, man.
Absolutely. Well, we'll do it again sometime. We have to do that Patreon episode where you just